But are they serious about
And John
masks
can hear us?
in Grand Marais?
John who?
So serious.
They're serious about what?
Masks. Oh, yeah, they don't want us there.
All right, good morning. We are going to convene the August 18th, I'm always flabbergasted with these dates, 2020 Scott County Board of Commissioners to order. Join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we got a little reverb going, which is always great in the morning. We are once again at full strength through Skype or Zoom, I guess in this case. So all of our votes are going to be roll call as well, and Deb is there. So let's move to number 2. And we are socially distancing, masks when appropriate, all those fun things. Item number 2, amendments to the agenda. I'm not seeing any. Are there any? I'm not seeing, looking left and right, so we're going to let those stand as distributed. Item number 3, we're going to approve the minutes of the August 4th, 2020 County Board meeting. Are there any changes, any corrections?
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? Otherwise, we'll look to Deb to take us through a roll call, please.
Commissioner Ruckman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
All right, thank you very much. Now moving on to item number 4, always a fun opportunity for folks to come in and speak with or at, in some cases, the county board. So I'm just gonna look around and see if there is anybody coming up in the hall, just to make doubly, triply sure. I'm not seeing anybody today, so let's move to item number 5. Back at the Scott County Delivers. A little different, but Chris, why don't you kick us off?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This is the kickoff for the restart of Scott County Delivers. We have 2 staff in the room today to present. We have 4 staff who are appearing remotely, and we're going to pop them in just a second, and we'll do some introductions. I did want to say that because this is our first time, we anticipate that there's a few things that aren't going to go swimmingly this morning, and we are going to ask for some grace just right up front, and we're going to learn and get better by next month when Suzanne and her team will be presenting. So thank you for this opportunity to restart Scott County Delivers. Tracy, can you bring up our folks that are logging in remotely? I'm trying. Okay.
And I just want to point out the redlining here. This was to be delivered March 17th. Ah, the good old days.
Yes. And so I think Lori Hess and her team did an interesting approach to the packet in that they really tried to call out, like, this is what we were going to talk with you about in March, and here we are today. And so that's the differential between the red print. So a couple things I wanted to say. Our focus today in this presentation is on recruitment and retention of our workforce. And our Employee Relations Department does so many important functions in this org, but we are going to focus today on that recruitment and retention of our workforce. It connects very specifically to the community indicators around cost of government. That if we are bringing people in and they are churning through our system, that is expensive. It takes time and money. It interrupts services. And ultimately, we really draw down on the expertise and the opportunity for innovation when we have people just coming in and out all the time. So it's important in that way. It is also part of our strategic plan to look at, initially, like we were talking about, seeing on our horizon the impending workforce shortage. Now that environment is different today, and we don't know how long it's going to look different. But we started to build some strategies in the strategic plan about how to address that and how to address having a high quality, diverse workforce. And so we're going to talk about those things as well. I think one of the cool things about this particular presentation is that we are highlighting 2 departments where staff turnover has been kind of a chronic challenge, and how have people used the data and how have they worked together and what kind of innovations have they attempted and what are their challenges to address that chronic turnover. So we are especially grateful to Carrie Wilmette and Scott Haas for bringing forward information from their departments today. And the last piece I just wanted to say in terms of introduction is that our format this morning is going to look roughly the same. We are not today going to entertain audience questions. Suzanne and I are going to ask questions. We'll give you the opportunity. Someday we may be able to figure out the audience piece, but that's not going to be today.
And you know what? Someday we will.
Someday we will.
As I referenced, March was the good old days. These are going to be the good new days.
The good new days. We are heading
new
for
days.
the good new days.
Yes.
All right, so with that, I'd like to do some introductions. I'm Chris Harder. I'm the Quality Improvement Manager here at Scott County.
Good morning, I'm Suzanne Arntzen, Child Welfare Manager here in Scott County.
I'm Lori Huss. I'm the Employee Relations Director.
I'm Scott Huss, I'm the Director of Emergency Management and 911 Communications. We'll make sure.
I'm Danny Lenz, I'm the Deputy County Administrator and CFO.
Where'd that voice come from?
I know. There he is.
Carrie?
I'm Joan Schwartz, Employee Relations Business Partner. Heather Shuey, also Employee Relations Business Partner.
I'm Carrie Wilmette, the Economic Assistance Director.
That's great, thank you. So for the folks who are appearing remotely, we can see you on your screen. I'm going to ask if you are in a quiet place to take your mutes off so you can participate. If you are not in a quiet place, please leave those mute buttons on. All right, so one of the pieces that we thought might make a remote session go a little bit better, if we start kind of walking through this packet in a little more of a sequential order than we have done in the past. And so I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne, who's going to talk about some questions from the introductory narrative.
All right, so good morning. I wanted to refer to page 3. So at the bottom of page 3, you talk about, I think probably this is to Lori, recruitment strategies to attract high quality, diverse workforce. Curious if you can talk about some of those sort of specific strategies or vision around strategies to attract sort of diversity in our workforce.
I would be happy to. So we are a business as a county of a very diverse workforce, as you have said, and so we try to work and partner with our departments and our managers and supervisors to go after where they believe the best talent and resources would be for hiring for people. So we do all kinds of things between reaching out to colleges, to universities, we do job fairs, we do ads, whether we're recruiting for a specific position or not, to keep our presence out there within diversity groups such as a Somali community, a Russian community. So we are doing all of that. We reach out to the industry groups. So for instance, HR has a bunch of different types of groups. So we reach out to those and keep an ongoing and continual kind of line in the water, so to speak, in order to remind people that Scott County is here and that we are an employer of choice.
Thanks. Do you have a sense, Lori, in terms of those strategies? Are there key places of recruitment that seem to be the most successful in terms of recruitment of diversity?
You know, I think I'm going to ask Heather maybe to speak to that, because Heather and Joan, as our HR business partners, are on the front line of managing the media plans and our outreach. So Heather or Joan?
I can take this one. So in the past, actually it's been just now a year, we have started regular ads in a Hmong newspaper, Latino community, Somali, and then Native American newspaper. They're all in their newspaper and their online website. It's not targeted to a specific job, like Lori said. There's general ads to keep our presence out there as an employer. I don't really have a strategy right now to be able to track where the people are coming from as far as who's seen it. But it's our first year running ads here, and we offer right into our second year. We also have a package with Minnesota Diversity. I post a job or Joan posts a job. They automatically scan our website and industry specific, and then there's some that are industry and like race specific, or veteran groups, women's groups, current sources. I don't have metrics for that, but we've been doing that for several years, knowing that they easily have contacts to some of these places.
Thanks,
And
Heather.
I'll just add, this is Joan. The challenge that we have, we use a survey tool when people apply of where did you see our ad? And the challenge is because so many of our tools direct them to the website, so then they can hit the link to get into governmentjobs.com to apply. We never know if, we try to target that language to say, where did you first see the job? But unfortunately, that those responses may not always be accurate because they may think, oh, I went to the website, so I'm going to click that I saw it on the website.
Do you have other things? Heather, before we go on, I just wanted to let you know that your audio started out really strong and then it faded. So if you just, I don't know if there's something with your microphone. We could hear you, but it was tougher. So take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Oh, can I jump in with one
Yeah,
more question?
for sure.
Under the what's not working well, it was identified the human capital management system. And so I was curious, maybe Lori, if you can talk a little bit, like what's the vision for how that might impact workforce, or what outcomes might you see look different with that kind of a management system?
Yeah, so there's a lot that has advanced in technology with enabling HR through technology. And we just have not, to this point, developed those tools where supervisors, managers, employees can be much more active and engaged in their own HR functions. We're still very paper-based, and that just really dates us and makes us less desirable in many cases as people come in and have expectations for apps, for instance, to submit, say, their forms. And we just don't have those yet. So those are the things that we envision and believe it could really help us and help our supervisors engage with employees, and employees engage with the work much better.
You know, as we're talking about that, those recruitment strategies, I'm just wondering, do you receive information? Like I noticed on the bottom of your emails, it always asks you if you want to provide some feedback about your experience working with our ER staff. Do you get feedback from people that are applying for jobs about that?
Not as much as we would like, no.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I highly encourage it.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah, feedback from employees is what helps us so much. Again, we're a workplace trying to meet the needs of our workforce. And so we do need that feedback from employees on a continual basis to know what's working and what's not. So I do highly encourage that.
Thanks. All right, I'd like to turn to page 10. And I have a number of questions for, I think probably specifically for the ER staff. But I spoke at the beginning about what it costs to kind of to cycle through the process of recruiting and bringing people into an organization and then onboarding them. And so I'm wondering if we could look at this graphic, and I want to just ask a general question, Lori, if you could just walk through, just like tell us what we're looking at when we look at this diagram.
So what this is we're trying to visually show at the top of this page, we cite a Minnesota statute 375.60. So statute requires us to set up hiring processes that are objective in nature. And so we need to assess candidates based on their relative ability, knowledge, and skills. And so what this is showing you is how that funnel works. Starting with the applicants that come in, coming down through qualifications. So we have minimum qualifications for our jobs. So they're filtered through that first. And then it comes to the referred. So as part of our filtering process, supervisors also help us outline the preferences for those skills, abilities, experiences that someone might have that we believe objectively would make for a good candidate for the position. And so that again filters it down to a smaller level of candidates that can be referred, meaning sent to the supervisor for consideration for the position. And so what this is just showing is that there is a process to hiring, some of which is statutorily based, and that we are as we filter candidates through, it's coming through what we have put visually as a funnel.
Can you talk about the holes?
You know what, I'm going to ask Heather and Joan, who are in charge of recruitment, to really jump in because they have the firsthand knowledge working with this every day with supervisors.
So the holes represent people who fall out on their own, like they can self-select out. We are, or the hiring managers are calling or emailing candidates to set up interviews. Sometimes they don't hear back, or they don't show up to the interview, or they notify us that they want to withdraw from the process. So these are all avenues where we are not weeding them out, but they're kind of weeding themselves out. And we've seen that happening a bit more and more, especially with interviews, like we call it ghosting. So that's just something else to consider. Like, we kind of control a portion of it with moving people through the funnel, but the applicants also control part of it as well. And that is a big number. That 16% of the referred applicants just didn't respond or withdrew.
Is that different? And
And
then
the
in your,
holes are, sorry.
go ahead.
The holes are all over the field because they can do that at different points. Some of them withdraw before they even get to the manager. Others withdraw when it's time for the background. Like, they fall out all over the place.
Does that number of that 16% look different than in years past?
We haven't, I don't think we've tracked it for many years, but I would say, without having like the actual statistics, certainly feels higher. Our applicant tracking system has allowed us to do self-scheduling for interviews, where instead of the supervisor calling every single person, they can email the candidate to go and log in and pick a time. And that's what we're hearing the applicants want, that ability to just go log in and do it quick. But I think that we also lose people there, because it's easy in this world to just delete an email and just think, oh, I'm not interested, and not tell. So it does feel like it's increasing, but I don't have the numbers with me to show that.
Do we have any data that compares our like kind of self dropout rate to other counties? Do we have any comparison data?
I don't think so, but I think that would be super interesting. I'm in some community, like NeoGov, our applicant tracking system. I'm in some groups in the NeoGov community, both local and both users across the country. And it doesn't seem to be just us. Like, even the HR magazines and articles that we read, like, this is something that's going on in a lot of places.
Okay.
And I think maybe some of it is just technology now just makes it really easy to delete an email. In some, generations, emails don't carry the same weight as they used to when you're a mobile device, and it's just like, oh, delete, and don't tell the business, and not really thinking about how that may reflect on you.
So I also,
I have a question. If I could ask a question, how often do we specifically recruit an individual? For example, if you wanted to have a specific capability, there was, for example, the Marnitas Table group that was in our county, and I observed somebody that was really extremely gifted with outreach into the Hispanic community, and I thought, wow, if we could have a person like this on our staff, what a benefit that would be. Now, if you see somebody in a category, whether it's IT or reaching a certain population group in our county, how often do we actually recruit a specific person? Can we do that, or how does that fit into the rules and regulations, and how often do we do it?
Unfortunately, statute limits us in being able to do that kind of outreach because we do have to have an open, competitive process. And my best advice for hiring managers in those situations is, encourage them to apply, and then those skill sets and traits that they have that you're thinking, wow, that would be really great, make sure that you ask those things in your supplemental questions and award points so that either that candidate or other similar candidates with skill sets to get you what you really need.
So that's another question I had about the supplemental questions, and I was a supervisor here and hired some people, and I wonder, like, as we look at, we want people that are creative and innovative, we want people that can solve problems, we want people who are willing to bring forth new ideas. When are we recruiting for those kinds of qualities, or are we recruiting for the technical skills that are also very important, obviously, to the position?
Well, I'll respond to that. Anytime there's an opening, we work with the hiring managers to review the, qualifications needed and to, update our supplemental questions so that we're recruiting for all the pieces that we need, all the facets. So to me, the supplemental questions should be a compilation of all those things in order to, get the best suited candidate and to bring them to work at Scott County.
Do you have an opinion, Joan, about, like, is that an area for growth, or is that something that supervisors are doing pretty well, kind of incorporating some of those other kinds of qualities?
Well, I like to think of it as a kind of a continuous quality improvement. To me, whenever we have an opening, we are always looking to see what can we do different, what can we do better. We try to review what did we do the last time, what didn't work so well, so that we can make those changes and hopefully, have positive results.
Okay. Kind of my.
Carrie,
Pardon me?
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Carrie, I was just hoping to add real quick to what Joan is saying. I think for that question, we get at a lot of those traits and skills during the interviewing process. So while we may not get a lot of information about those areas in the supplemental questions, once we get to the interview, at least kind of speaking for the Economic Systems Department, we really try to tailor some of those interview questions to ask a little bit deeper in those areas that you mentioned.
Nice, thanks.
Another thing I just wanted to add too is looking forward, like the 2025 workforce, they really are looking at recruiting changing again because of demographic shifts. So where there used to be potentially 3 people looking for a job vacancy, we now only have 0.6 people looking for every job vacancy that's out there. So there has to be a change from an employer's perspective in our ability and willingness to train. So looking more for skills-based interviewing and or skills-based recruitment is what organizations are going to need to do to stay viable in a potentially, again, limited labor market, especially for certain skill sets.
So,
Do you have a sense, Lori, just how COVID impacts that when you talk about 0.6?
Right.
Like, do we see the impact of COVID longer term?
You know what, we don't know yet, and we're really in a holding pattern, and at some point I would encourage everybody to look at page 29, which shows the cliff we fell off as far as where we were heading in February with vacancies and unemployment and where we landed after COVID. And that's the big unknown right now, is how quickly will the market rebound. But the fact that we had skills, we had a mismatch of skills, and we have certain job classes where we didn't have enough workers, that still remains and is expected to remain an issue. It just depends, again, how quick and how fast the economy rebounds. But again, to me, that chart on page, right there, on the left-hand side, it shows you. So in February, when we were planning for this, we were at the tip top of that green line, excited about where we were headed and some of our strategies for competing in a labor market. Then we hit COVID and literally fell off that cliff. And so for us, what we need to do and how we need to attract employees hasn't fully changed, but we're in this kind of holding pattern, addressing other things right now amid COVID, and so that's yet to be.
Before we move on to the department conversations, can you tell us how much hiring have we done since March? Do you know, off the top of your head?
So I don't have the number that we've hired. We've had 31 people leave since March, and at this point we're only filling our basically essential positions, 24/7 ops, and single incumbent positions, for which we have 130 out of our 740 are single incumbents. So we're trying to pause, and yet there are some that we are refilling.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question about sort of, well, not related to slide 10 and that sort of recruitment? And that is around NeoGov. So I've been here from before NeoGov, where we sort of did all the paper processing, and now we've got NeoGov. Are there metrics or ways to sort of assess, are there efficiencies that have been gained for ER and or the business side since implementation of NeoGov?
Oh, that's an easy answer. I think there's definitely efficiencies, and especially when you talk about the large-scale recruitments and with the implementation of the self-scheduling. I can think of the first time that I worked with Vicki in the sheriff's office to do the deputy recruitment. I think we were interviewing over 60 candidates and trying to call them, and the inefficiencies of calling and then leaving a message and then having the person call you back when you're calling the next person. And with self-scheduling, the notice can be sent out to all candidates at one time, so they all have equal access to, the interview dates and times, that are put out there for them. So I think there's definitely efficiencies. And I'm going to turn it to Heather for the metrics, if there's any other metric piece of it. She's kind of our data specialist.
I don't know if I have metrics on efficiencies just because I was not here before NeoGov. But for the reasons that Joan listed, also, I think when the hiring managers are sending notices, I hope it's to them. The scoring is a lot faster than manually, but it's not perfect, as a lot of our hiring managers have seen. We've learned that we have to really refine how we ask those questions. And then, Joan and I still do some checking over. I know that there's some questions that are easily stretched, like when we're hiring for the library and we ask about working in libraries, people will say, well, I've been to the library as a patron. And that's not what we're looking to give points on. So we're continually refining and still having the spot check, but overall it's still a lot faster than manually scoring.
I wonder, maybe I'll throw this one to Scott and Carrie. From the business side, do you see differences or efficiencies with the NeoGov system? Scott, do you remember?
And I also wasn't around prior to NeoGov, so I'm getting a little feedback here. It is not. So I can't say how different it is, but I can say that as a hiring manager, I get access to the NeoGov system wherever I am. So there's many times where I'll have an employee where I'm at the offer stage and they're not around during the daytime hours. So as a result, I can, having this on my laptop, I can make that phone call in the evening when they're home and make that contact instead of having it wait and just be a manual process. So the flexibility of having the system anywhere is definitely beneficial to me.
Also not here prior to NeoGov, but I would just echo everything that has just been said. I think, not only as a hiring manager, but as a department director, if I'm being consulted by the supervisors on, consulted with, asking questions to help them with the hiring process and choosing between candidates, I can go in from anywhere, I can review their applications, their resumes, kind of take a look at what their salary level is currently, what they're looking for. And be able to do that remotely and in an instant without having to go to their office and page through all of the resumes and applications in paper form has been really nice.
All right, great. Let's move into the program discussions, can we? On page 11, I think our ER staff did a nice job of putting some of the characteristics that these two departments share, or that are, not all of them, but a list of some of the complicating factors, the 24/7 piece, extensive training requirements, lots of outside regulations, some of those things. And it is noted somewhere in the narrative that these two departments are really industry-wide. These are departments that have high staff turnover. This is not unique to Scott County. But I'd like to talk a little bit about how Carrie and Scott, how your two departments have sort of navigated this and how you've used data. Suzanne, do you have a specific question to start that off?
one of my questions was really around just given sort of the ongoing challenges around recruitment that have happened over the years. I'm just curious, have there been particular strategies or things that you have tried over the years to address it? And where might you have seen successes along the way?
So from the 911 side, we've really altered our interview questions. I think we kind of got to this in one of our previous questions, but we really look strongly in the interview at traits. We look for a really strong sense of teamwork skills amongst the candidates. We look for a really strong sense of public service motivation. And really for us, it has to be an employee who wants to come in and serve the public. Kind of a funny story, but every employee I've had that I've given an offer who's tried to negotiate a wage up has failed the training process. So employees who come in with this, their goal and motivation is to come in and do something where they're really serving the community, they're more likely to work out as a long-term hire versus someone who's doing this as a job or something that they thought would be interesting to try. So we really look in the interview process to try and define what's driving this person to this position, and are they going to be a good fit for actually succeeding in that job. So I think that's a really critical step for us. We've also implemented a number of pre-employment screening or pre-interview screening tests that I think help us out quite a bit. We use a program called Select Advantage. It's administered by ER for us, and that filters out based on judgment-based questions to see if people have good common sense skills and good judgment. And then we also use a program called Critical that basically puts people through a gamut of tests, testing multitasking ability, memory, typing skills, and then we start with a core typing test. And that's also, I think Joan can speak to this one, but that's also where we see that cone really shape in and how many people fail those pre-employment and pre-interview tests.
So since trying some of those or implementing some of those strategies, are you beginning to see changes in terms of your turnover?
I think we are to a point. I think it's still a bit early to see what the long-term retention is and how that benefits. But what we are seeing is a higher percentage of people who are making it through the training program and who have a better, I guess, core capability. The role of a 911 dispatcher is an extremely difficult job. It takes the right skill set, the right behavior, right attitude to be able to do it. If people can't multitask, they can never make it through training. And so just by applying the filter and seeing who can actually listen to something and type at the same time helps alleviate some of those people that are really nice people that are just never going to be able to do the job.
Do we, as an organization, do we consider any of those other tests? Like I'm thinking like the common sense test. Do we consider using that more broadly?
We'd all fail.
Well, is that, that's a fair question, isn't it?
In terms of how one might use judgment, right? And so I don't know enough about how the system works.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah, so the tests Scott's talking about are specific to telecommunicator jobs. So I'm not aware of a common sense test that's broadly used, but there are many tests that can be used. And we have tried many things throughout the 20 years I've been here to, again, evolve in kind of that total quality improvement to try to get at what makes for the best Scott County employee.
Carrie, I wonder if you want to speak to any of the strategies you've tried over time?
Sure. So specific to income maintenance and our eligibility specialist area, we have tried a few things over the last few years. The first, just like Scott, we have gone through a few iterations of our interview questions, always kind of trying to improve those and tweak them if we're seeing too many areas, any areas that we're missing. We have also started kind of closely tracking each individual resignation and kind of their reason for leaving based on what we know in an effort to try to find, any trends or any patterns in certain areas or for certain reasons. We obviously have the exit interview that staff can voluntarily do when they leave with ER, but because it's voluntary, we don't necessarily get data from every exit. And also, there may be some things that we, as kind of the direct supervisor or department director, know about the situation that we can track privately in terms of, just being able to know why people are leaving. And then taking a look at that and seeing, what do we as the supervisors, as a business, kind of what roles, if any, did we play in that? What kind of control did we have over the situation or not? Just to see if there's anything that we need to be paying closer attention to. Probably one big thing that we did in recent years is we changed the job title. So previously, the job title was Financial Assistance Specialist, and now it is Eligibility Specialist. And we have had some meetings with ER and supervisors, and did that in an effort to more maybe accurately reflect what the job was to our applicants. We were finding that we had a lot of applicants that were applying for Financial Assistance Specialists who maybe had backgrounds in banking or accounting, which is all great experience. But kind of going back to that, the point about the supplemental questions and answering about the experience that they had, thinking it was direct experience when really it might not have been. So changing it to eligibility specialists really reflected that they are determining eligibility for our public assistance programs, and kind of tried to tweak the description of the job that goes out with the postings, just so those that were applying really had a better idea of what they were applying for. And then the last thing I'll add is that the supervisors have started doing stay interviews, and this is something that they learned about, and I think maybe some of us have heard about it in different areas or at different conferences. Other counties are doing something similar. And each of them are kind of doing it in a different way, but basically they're in their regular check-ins with their staff, kind of carving out some time to talk about, they have a list of questions that they choose from at each meeting, kind of getting at what they like about working here, what keeps them here, what we can do to help support them in their work, maybe what we can do better within the department to help support the teams and the work that they're doing. To try to really understand why folks are staying. By the time they leave and we do an exit interview, it's almost in some ways too late. So we want to get at why are people staying here, and so we can really build upon some of the great things that are happening, and improve in areas where we're hearing from staff like it would be a little bit better if we could do it this way. So those are some things that we're doing.
Could I ask a couple questions on exit interviews? I'm wondering what percent of our people leaving are being interviewed, and is that interview, is it a face-to-face, or how does that occur? I guess it's my belief that really great source of information what we would gather through an exit interview, and if we're not taking full advantage of that, I think that would be a loss or mistake. So if you can comment a little more on percent and how does an exit interview conduct?
This is Heather. I can answer part of that. So the exit interview is a SurveyMonkey link that is anonymous, and it's to all exiting employees except for temp employees, because it's kind of expected that their job will end at a certain time. And it is optional, and then on top of that, they're not required to answer each question. So we get a good amount of responses, but they may not respond to every question within the survey. They also meet with Kristen Schmidt one-on-one before they leave to kind of go over benefits, and with her, I don't know if it's just her very kind personality, but people open up to her a little bit too about why they're leaving. And then, we can gain some insight from that meeting. And then I think some supervisors might do a conversation before the person leaves, but I don't know about that. And then we assemble the results quarterly and redact, names and certain information that might identify individuals, and I believe Lori shared that with the cabinet.
Okay, what you said gives me little confidence in our exit interview process. I don't think you're ever going to get the kind of information that you really would want through a SurveyMonkey tool. So I would encourage you to look at how to beef up, improve, get more vital information. I think anything short of a face-to-face interview is going to be inadequate in my opinion.
All right. Can we go to page 12? So these are the program-specific statistics for the last 5 years for both the Sheriff's Communications Department and Income Maintenance. And so I want to give both Scott and Carrie the opportunity to pull out any key pieces in the data for your particular department. Like, what are you watching? What stands out to you as far as moving forward based on this data?
So I'll start off here. We've had an interesting time in 911. We've gone through, I think, a rough historical patch, going back about 10 years ago, where there was some challenges that ER actually came in with some resources to try and assist, and there was some personnel shifts that occurred going back to about 5 years ago. Unfortunately, the culture in the organization was not as healthy as it should have been, and from that period, I think we have one employee who's been retained through that time period. So it's a hugely impactful point of not doing business right and not taking care of your employees. Obviously, I'm working very diligently to shift that around, but that time, because we lost all of that talent, it's very difficult to continue to build an organization. Even when I post for a supervisor now, my supervisor candidates are people who are within a year or two of experience, whereas typically you'd have someone with 7 years of experience, someone who really knows the job and is ready for an advanced leadership challenge. Now we're feeling that with people who are still learning the core elements of the job itself. So we went through a really structurally difficult time, and I believe we're on the right track heading forward, but there will be some continued challenges to move past that point.
Scott, maybe just to go back a little bit around recruitment, so we might be jumping back a bit. I just wonder, given sort of current culture, climate, how is recruitment, I guess, changing around 911 dispatch? And if so, can you speak a little bit about what that might be looking like?
So I think culturally, we as a country have changed quite a bit, especially as of late and as of the last couple of years. I can speak broadly to public safety as a whole. We're experiencing a huge challenge in finding good candidates in any public safety role. Things have really changed. When I applied for a sheriff's deputy position with the county, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applicants. I think our last round, Joan would have the numbers, but we were, I think, somewhere around 60 applicants. So, and we're seeing this across the state, we're seeing this across the country. The number of people who are in school right now, even to get into criminal justice or law enforcement programs, it's about half the students, if not lower, that are even pursuing that. So culturally, people are not moving into these types of positions, and that's having a big impact on us. I know that people I've talked to who are in western Minnesota, who typically would in small towns or small counties get 20 or 30 candidates, they're maybe getting one candidate for a job posting now. So it's just people, we've as a society somewhat devalued hard work and serving the public in these types of roles. And we're seeing the impact of that now in our hiring process. So again, that's why it's so important that we really look for the right candidates when we do our hiring process and try and find those people who are really here to do the job and do it well.
Super uplifting. Yikes.
Well, I think, like I said, it's cultural. I think if you recall when Shakopee Academies was even here before the board, we talked about they have a government program and they requested our assistance, and the government classes that they had, one was social injustice and the other one was activism. This is what we're building. This is what we're building towards, and it's not building towards effective progressive government. It's we're just in culturally a shift point now, and we're going to be here for a while.
I brought that up at the academies about what are you doing here? It got some traction, but I don't know how much.
And that's, really that's our job candidates. If we think about who my primary applicants are, these are the people who are really at the college age or just and that's a big majority of the people who apply for our positions in public safety.
I just want to jump in quick too, because one of the other things that's different in the dispatch area and the sheriff's office is just the age. They trend much younger than the rest of the county. And so that is also a different in expectation. So as we talk about recruiting, we also have to look at the retention side, and again, what is the expectations and how are we managing expectations of people coming in with what our operations might be. And that's where I've seen across the county and some of our younger, maybe that clash of where the organization is with some of our expectations and a difference of opinion and or need. And we as an organization need to figure out what are we going to do with that, because we are changing in demographics, and that is going to speed up, not slow down. And we see that in some of the statistics within this document.
Lori, we're going to come back to Carrie's comments on her program data and follow up with you on a couple more things. But could we just go to page 18 for a minute? Because that is where that average age data, and you were talking about kind of the changing expectations based on the age of our employees and what they're looking for in the workplace. And I just wanted to give you a chance to reflect on like as you look at this average data piece, what stands out for you? And maybe that is about succession planning, but maybe it's really about how we change how we respond to employee expectation.
Sure, and again, for me, and I've said this before, so this isn't going to come as anything new for people who have heard from me before, but when you look at the difference of the circles between 16 and now, the shift is all our boomer population, which is largely what our policies and value systems in what people term a more bureaucratic government. Our processes and systems are based on value bases of a boomer population. We are completely shifting in numbers from boomer to millennial, which is a very different, and again, not good or bad, just different. And so the expectations of how fast I move, how much feedback I get, whether or not I have to work holidays. If something comes up and I'm on shift work, but I want to be home because I got a great opportunity to do something, do I just have to come to work? There are very big differences there. Sucking up overtime when I started 20 years ago, overtime was premium and people wanted it and worked and worked and worked and worked, and it's not taken the same. And so as an organization, we may have to look at how many people then do we need to staff in a dispatch center, because it's not being covered in the same manner because of value differences than it was. So all of those are things that we continually have conversations about and talk about, but they aren't fast to move, and the patience level of employees and expectations is faster than we seem to be able to maybe address some of those things.
Lori, can you comment on page 20 though? I think that shows when you're sitting at 12 years for your average number of years, it's as good or better than any of the other metro counties we compare it to. And my understanding is, from a retention standpoint, that is better than the private sector.
Yes, Leslie, that is correct. And so, again, it's like anything where it's an average. If you compare, though, that county average of 11.93 on page 20, but go back to page 12 where we were and look at the average years of tenure in these two departments where we're having difficulty, again, that's a very different picture. So we're at 1.5 to 2.5 years in a dispatch center. So we have different pockets, again, where we're going to have different strategies for how we are addressing, again, retention, because the needs of the workforce isn't as static as maybe it once was.
And that's the point I was hoping you'd make. It's different for these different units, and in some places we have to try, right, some different thoughts and processes for some of these. And so I just think that's such a big point here, that's changed from everybody maybe being the same, the way it was historically looked at in that boomer world.
I want to, excuse me, I want to add just one little point. Lori talked about the shift from the boomers to the millennials and just different expectations. Being that I have a much younger staff, I see some of these expectations manifesting in the workplace, and especially running a 24/7 operation. I have in the last year had an employee who with 1 year of experience and spending, about half of a career at that point working on night shift, said, you know what, I'm about ready to start a family, so I want to work day shift for the rest of my career. This is one of the real challenges that we face. There's an expectation out there that there should be more flexibility, there should be more ideal schedules, and the ability to rise up in the ranks very quickly. And we just don't in our structure have that capability. I have to maintain staffing 24/7. I can't say, okay, you've been here for a year, you want to work days, that's it, I can guarantee you're going to work days for the rest of your career. It's not viable. We have to provide service 24/7, and that means we're going to put people in shifts they don't want to work. And if we don't do that, we don't answer 911 calls. So the consequences is significant. The flip side of that is some people say, you know what, I'm not working nights, so I'm going to go make more money at a different job. And that's one of the difficult things that we constantly battle with some of these changes.
Thanks, Scott. Carrie, can I give you the same opportunity that Scott had to look at the data on page 12 and talk about, like, what are the key pieces that stand out for you as you think about moving forward?
Yeah, I think when I look at the income maintenance graph, I look for a couple things. I look first at, like, is there anything that stands out? And, just looking at the numbers in and of themselves, 2018 for total terms, we had 10 people leave. That is the highest in the last several years. So it kind of goes back to that tracking spreadsheet I was talking about that we developed in, getting information from ER in terms of who left and the date that they left, and then us kind of filling in on the background, what we were aware of about the reasons for leaving, and looking at patterns, looking at issues, anything that we could have done differently, anything that we had control over that we could have changed, kind of starting there. And then, I also like to sort of take a step back, though, and look, and in comparison maybe to the rest of the county or just in general, how do we compare to what a healthy turnover rate is? So while even 4 people leaving in 1 year feels like a lot, and it is, I think the supervisors would say, yes, having to train 4 people in a year is a lot. It's a large it's a large unit. So income maintenance is a unit within the economic systems department, but in income maintenance alone, we have 36 FTEs. So it is a large number. So when you're looking at 4 people leaving, that's around 11%. How does that compare to what we would consider a healthier turnover rate? Is it something to be concerned about? Is this just, kind of normal turnover? So those are a couple of things that I would look at.
All right, thank you. I wonder if, before we move on, if any of you could speak to, what do you see, like, obviously there's been pretty close working relationships and partnerships between your departments and employee relations, and I'm wondering if there's anything that people could offer about what are the strengths of those current partnerships, and are there places for improvement?
Well, I'll just say, I think it's been great having business partners in ER to help us through our recruitment process. They bring a different set of eyes, a different skill set to the recruitment process. We know what we need in of the position and what we'd like with experience, if we can get it, kind of what that background is and the actual job is. And their perspective from the employee relations applicant side, things for us to consider. They just open our eyes to different things when it comes to looking at our supplemental questions and changing some things, or even kind of how they're viewing the scoring process and how they're looking at past experience and whether they're counting it or not. That has been really helpful, because I think that we thought of things in a different way than we wouldn't have before. And at any point, if we have questions or concerns, we can quickly consult with them and they can help us walk us through it. Has been really, really great.
And I think from our perspective, one of the really beneficial components is just how many, based on how many pre-employment or pre-interview steps we have, it's just so effective to have somebody who's there as the welcoming voice to walk people through all those steps. I wear enough hats already. I don't have any capability of sitting and answering the phone calls that Joan does on our part. And, well, what about this? And, you know, I wasn't able to get this to work. Can you reset it? And I mean, Joan ends up doing tech support for some of our applicants who are trying to do online check-ins, and knowing that they've got a good contact who's there, who's going to help them through the process and understand if something goes wrong, that they're there to support them and make. I think really that's the gateway for our new employees to see what Scott County is about. It's that openness, the willing to be supportive, and that brings them into our organization on the right foot.
One thing I would want to add from the business partner perspective is that it's been helpful to me as the business partner that the departments have been open to having me at one or two of their meetings or even doing job shadowing, so I can get a better feel, you know, right there for what issues they're facing, so that we can kind of work together for solutions. That's been
All right, I'm going to move us on. There's so much in this packet that's really interesting to talk about, so I'm just going to pick something I'm interested in, and that is on page 27, and it is the results of the last employee survey, and the question is, what percentage of our employees would recommend Scott County as a great place to work? And I wonder if we could talk about, as we think about the next employee survey, how does the changes related to COVID, the teleworking, the changes in how people do business, how does that change how we might approach this next survey?
Those are great questions, Chris. Those are the things we're talking about right now. ER and administration first and foremost, and then it'll move from there. But yeah, what are the right questions? Because so much has changed. So again, you try to have questions that trend over years, but there's really so many new things we need to delve into and ask. So that is what we're talking about now, and trying to figure out when is the right time to do that. Mm-hmm. But super important, and we do need to hear from employees and hear, really to me, more how do they need to be supported in this new working world we're in that continues to shift, and I'm expecting it will continue to shift for a while.
Can I maybe just piggyback on that? And as we think about certainly the attention to diversity in our workforce, are there strategies within the survey or other strategies, I guess, around how we might be hearing from different populations within our workforce, making sure that, for example, staff of color feel like they've got a safe place to share their feedback around their experience?
So again, another, important topic and important conversations that we are having. We have been holding employee group meetings to allow and enable those types of things. As you know, you've been helpful in planning those. We had a cabinet meeting yesterday to talk about this following a board workshop where we talked about it because, again, we do want to connect with our community. We want staff to connect with our communities. We want to be able to, again, be an employer of choice where everybody feels like they fit and belong. And so it's work we're continuing to do.
All right. This is just a clarification point on page 20. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong page. On page 16, please. So I just wanted to qualify or just give somebody a chance to confirm that as we look at the differences in the total number of employees between divisions, some of the divisions have shown if you look at administration, significantly higher numbers. If you look at who else? Maybe that's just it. Community services, that those changes in the number of employees reflect a reorganization, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Correct.
On page 21, I'm just curious, are there, from all of the data, are there 2 or 3 areas that you really would want to see Scott County targeting?
I will wade into that. So as I looked at this, so the bullet points I listed for myself that I think are where we need to find common ground across generations as well as races, ethnicities would be predictable rewards, which is, again, pay benefits. We get a lot of feedback about our pay for performance system and how to make it more consistent and more recognizable to employees of what is the difference between meets, exceeds, outstanding. So predictable rewards, a sense of belonging. So again, that comes to our total rewards and the culture that we have here. Can everyone bring their full self to work and feel like they can be themselves at work? The meaningful work, which I think is what is our competitive advantage and continues to be, because people do feel they have impact in their communities through the work that they do with the county, and I think that's super important. But continuing to build on that and making sure that we talk about that, because that is a great thing about Scott County. We need to step up the pace on growth and development. It's super important to employees. That might look like maybe career ladders, career lattices. People want, we had worked for years to get to kind of a single level where you could grow and have headroom in your job, but you didn't maybe move and change titles. But that's not where value systems maybe are going now. So we need to look at some of that type of stuff, and we need to do more training and just-in-time training type things. And then recognition for efforts, meaning people want to be recognized either monetarily, we hear that a lot, and or just be recognized and ask questions for the value that they feel they bring to the workplace. So to have a voice and to have a say in things. So those are, to me, some of the critical pieces that we need to continue to evolve. And I'm sure others on the call have their own thoughts.
Does that line up the same for the business units? All right. All right, I'm going to give people, it's 10 o'clock, and I am going to give people an opportunity, all of you on the panel, if there are any other key pieces that we, points that you would really like for the commissioners and the public to hear. I'm going to give you one last chance to do that, and then I'm going to turn it over to the commissioners for questions. So are there any last points that you feel like you would wish to make that you haven't had a chance to speak to? Laura, you want to start?
Can you hear me? Okay. So first and foremost, we have a great workforce. So we really do. We have passionate people. We have people who are really committed to the work that they do. And so I just want that out there that, again, Scott County is a great place to work, and I potentially am biased as I work here, but it really is a great place to work. And I want to make sure people are proud to talk about that. People are proud to talk about the things that we do, because we do a lot of things very well as an employer. And there's always room for improvement, which we are open to doing, and want to partner with our varying divisions who have very different needs across the disciplines that they are fulfilling. And so we need to partner and have different strategies across the organization.
Thanks. Scott, is there anything left that you would like to speak to?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of circle back to Lori's comment about changes in overtime. I still have some employees who love to pick up overtime shifts, but one of the things that I've seen is exactly what Lori talked about. There's a huge shift against picking up those shifts. One of the interesting things I think we can learn from one of our neighbors, Ramsey County was chronically short-staffed in their 911 center like everywhere else. And again, putting things in perspective across the metro, when I'd go to our regional meetings at the MESB, they do a roll call, a round robin of how many people short everyone was, and there was at least 50 people short in 911 positions in the metro at any given meeting. Ramsey County was chronically short. They had employees working 15-hour shifts, I believe 5 days a week, and that's just the way they were doing business. They were surviving with overtime. They actually had a situation where one of their employees walked in her door at home after a 15-hour shift, set her keys down on the counter, and she fell over, and she was dead. And that was part of the stimulus for Ramsey County to say, you know what, we need to start taking care of our people who are working these types of shifts. Since they were provided some additional staffing, their retention rate has actually gone significantly up. So while people say, yes, I love the extra money on overtime, I think the lesson learned out of that is that when we give people time to be human on top of doing some of these difficult jobs, it allows them to be more balanced, it's more healthy for them, and as a result, people stay in these positions longer. So there's a risk-reward factor there that is kind of difficult to say because, you know, ultimately means we have to add more FTEs to get the same amount of work done and not rely on overtime to get there. And I think that's an interesting shift, I'll call it, in just kind of the behavior of our incoming workforce that I think we really need to, I think, at least discuss and debate, because how that's going to shape our workforce for the next 10 to 15 years, I guess I don't know yet. But I think it's something we really have to be aware of.
So how people sort of integrate their work world and their personal world into.
Yeah, it's really shifting. It is shifting, and it's going to change it's really going to change the scope of our workforce countywide, I believe. And since employment is such a large portion of our levy, I don't know how that impacts us yet, but I think that's just something we're going to have to try and understand and learn and deal with as our employment changes over the next decade.
Scott, can I ask quickly, is there any talk at those MES meetings about, instead of all you guys working in different sites, just let's have 3 areas where there's 911s or maybe 1 or something? Is there talk about that or not?
So it's from probably the last 15 years that I've been involved in different committees at the MESB. Originally, it was really resisted. Everyone was kind of holding out their own little fiefdoms and silos in protecting that. I think there's more discussion of that now and more willing to be collaborative. However, there's also a lot of risks with that as people are learning. So during the civil unrest in the city of Minneapolis, they went for days without being able to answer 911 calls. They actually had direction given out to their 911 dispatchers. When you get a call, unless there's an imminent threat of life or death, we're not taking the call. So for days on end, they literally weren't taking calls unless it was critical because they were so overwhelmed. And one of the things that unfortunately has happened in the 911 world is anytime your area is involved in some kind of high-profile event, now there's organized denial of service attacks that are occurring on the 911 centers. So in North Dakota, when they had the pipeline protests going on, their 911, we actually interviewed one of their dispatchers who was considering coming to Minnesota. She said all night long they would get constant calls internationally from people just yelling and swearing at them, tying up their phone lines. Wow. So there's an organized movement as part of whatever it is that the world's shifting to that is into trying to take out 911 and trying to destroy that element that keeps us a civil society. So yes, in some ways there's efficiencies gained by being more consolidated and being able to share those resources. But at the same point in time, there's also a new set of risks that are in place with the new actions, that if we are consolidated and something happens in one of our areas, our citizens aren't going to get service, potentially for days. So there's definitely some challenges there.
Well, I'm going to dovetail on that because we sit on that same board, and I think I know I've mentioned this before. I know we're getting off topic a little bit, but as it relates to that, a county commissioner had asked a sitting city councilor, Minneapolis city councilor, like, hey, with this defunding thing, will that impact 911? And I was really expecting no, by no means. Are you kidding me? And it was probably, which floored me. So we definitely need to look at some sort of redundancy moving forward, because this will not be the last time. It's not the first time, right? It won't be the last time. Because that is just unacceptable.
Yes.
So something's got to be done, and new thinking and redundancy. And I get everyone's got their own little small K kingdom and they want to keep that, but we live in a new day. Remember, these are the good new days.
These are the good new
Right.
days.
And they're
yes.
gonna get good
Yes, they are. They are.
in the midst of the chaos. The light will always shine, which is a great thing, but
So, Mr. Chair, interestingly enough, I actually partnered up with Ramsey County's director, and we were working on a grant submittal prior to COVID coming around and prior to the civil unrest to try and get basically a fully operational hosted 911 center that would be a backup system for us that we could upstaff to supplement an area or to bring in and basically cover an area when there's an upgrade or a planned maintenance or something like that. So we'd actually started that process, but there's a big cost to that.
sure, yeah.
So we're leaning forward before we realized how important it was going to be to have a portable solution like that that would allow us to surge. One of the challenges we have in the metro is that even though basically the entire 5-county metro is using the same computer-aided dispatch program, they're all on separate installs, so they don't share data cleanly. We're on something totally separate, so we're not able to integrate it all with them. But that's one of the big changes that we'll see from a technology standpoint is, as a metro, we need to be willing to look at that and, if the situation happens where an area is overloaded, how do we spread that out and how do we share that? And there's a lot of really political components that come into place on who's going to see my data and who's going to access our calls and who's going to have that information. So there's a big challenge there.
Well, and I think, was this the right term, an organized denial of service attack on 911 in different, in Minneapolis recently? Is
Yes.
that documented? Is that I can speculate, but is that a documented?
Yes, so I've read after action documents that are clear, and this is not a Minneapolis thing. Like I said,
Correct,
this was in
right.
North Dakota. It's
Yep.
happening in other areas. Any area that has a big high profile event is getting clobbered, and it's this willful desire to take out 911. Because if you can take out that, you basically take out the component that controls the civil society. There's no way for people to call for help now. It's might makes right at that point in time.
Well, it's a lot of warfare tactics there, right?
It is.
Divide and conquer, command and control. I mean, this isn't.
It would be helpful if we all took a moment. Actually, it takes about an hour to read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. This is the scripture that these people are operating from. And it almost looks hopeless in that people who covet quietness and peaceableness and dwelling together like neighbors are always vulnerable to people who worship chaos and violence in some sort of misguided quest to destroy normal and create a new normal. That's one reason I really rebel in my guts when people talk about, well, welcome to the new normal. No, the new normal is destruction, it's death. It's not organized, peaceful lives that we all want to live together, which is why we organized 911 so many years ago, so that we could have a respectable, cohesive point of contact when we got our lives into trouble, because trouble was not normal. It was abnormal, and so we looked for someone to call to for help, other than dialing 0 and imposing on the operator like we used to do. This is a deliberate attack. It's deliberately organized by people who are international in scope, who are trying to destroy normal, and this is why they do things like this. That sounds pretty hopeless, but I hope that whenever we're interviewing for employees, that we're not looking at their skin color or the way they cover their heads, but we're looking at the core cultural values that they hold dear. We can live together with differences in appearance and things like that, but those core, remember a couple of weeks ago at that diversity training, I said the issue from this commissioner's perspective is not skin color, it's cultural values. What do we hold in common? And if we strive for peaceable, quiet lives in our neighborhoods and with our families, we're all in, we're on the same team. But when we have people who are deliberately trying to destroy that normal and create chaos, largely for political advantage, those are the people we need to really discriminate against. That's what we need to watch out for. So I don't know how you do that with 911, except maybe recognize quickly a denial of service attack and then start bouncing every phone call that doesn't come from your own area. Maybe that's a way, I don't know. But when we're looking at employees, thank you, Lori, and your team for the group of employees you have assembled here at Scott County. But going forward, we need to recognize this is more of a spiritual discussion than it is a racial discussion or anything like that. And it just, it concerns me greatly what we're leaving our kids and our grandkids when this is going on from the outside. And we're just trying to live our lives, plow the streets, flush the toilets, mow the grass, raise our kids, things that are normal. And there are actually people out there that intend to destroy normal. Read Saul Alinsky's little pamphlet, and you'll basically have their game plan on what they intend to do.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, we definitely need to stand for, it's always right to do right. So just a clarification, when I say it's a good new day, I am not embracing it's a new normal.
Thank you for making that very clear.
Yeah.
The new normal is not a good thing.
No, I do not embrace, so when I say it's a good new day, it's a choice that I make, that in the midst of the chaos, the light will still be bright, in a beacon on a hill.
Thank you.
It has to be chosen. So, all right, so that's good. It's a good word, because sometimes you gotta take a stand, even if it's not politically correct. But it's always correct. It's always right to do right. I'm a simple guy, I gotta live by simplisms, and it's always right to do right.
And, you know, just to wrap up on that, with the doom and gloom, I want you to be aware of the dangers out there. That's my compunction, is to warn the folks that I represent on this board that there's danger afoot.
Oh, boy.
And we've been very blessed in Scott County that it hasn't crossed the river that much yet. But please guard against it. But having said all that, I just need to remind us the verse from the Psalms, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will get down on my knees and say thank you. Thank you for this day. Thank you for
So let us
indulging me, Mr.
rejoice and be
Chairman.
glad in it, is the
Yeah,
rest of that,
be
right?
glad.
It's a
And
choice.
be glad.
It's a choice.
That's the hard part, is to try to be glad.
So I'm feeling the hook. I'm feeling the hook to kind of move.
Yes.
Yes.
Along.
So
Can we-
I appreciate the
Ask us
conversation. I really do, and it's clear to me that we'll want to have Scott come back and talk at some point about some of these issues. I mean, it's been a very good discussion. I appreciate that. I guess I'll open it to you, Mr. Chair, if there are any last questions from the board. Otherwise, I do know you have a full agenda this morning.
Mr. Chair, Chris, everybody, thank you. I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly, Lori. We have a great group of employees. I am more thankful and glad for them every day and every time I work with them. And I know the work's hard, and I think you really hit on that on some of the recruiting, because they need to have that drive for public service, because in so many, well, all our jobs are important, but so many of our public-facing jobs, whether it be sheriff's deputy or 911 or eligibility specialists or building inspectors, we're not always working with people who are in the best mood at their finest hour, telling them the news they want to hear. So, or working with people who even feel like we should exist, even though, you know, we're fairly limited government here. So that's so important, and it's so important we support our employees because of just the nature of the job, and that's just the tension that's there. I'm not even going to comment on the right or wrong. We hope everybody can be kind and thankful even when they disagree or don't think they need a permit or whatever. Really important. But the thing that I heard lots of great information today, the thing I really latched onto that I want to hear more about, and that I hope if it is serving us well, is what Carrie talked about with the stay interviews. I heard Commissioner Ulrich, and I agree, it's hard to get good data from SurveyMonkey exit interviews, but I also understand why that's happened, because I've been in public and private sector where exit interviews, we want to have them, but we can't make people do them, and we can't make people give us true information that sometimes they're willing to do confidentially. But these stay interviews, yeah, I think we should be learning from that unit and how they're doing, and really see if we can implement them more to keep our people, keep good workers, and increase that camaraderie, solidarity, what we need to continue to be a good place to work and a healthy place for people who are working here. So I'd be excited to hear more about that, excited to hear what we've learned even, you know, I'm sure after a couple of those stay interviews, we learn things we make changes on, and I think that's good for us to hear too. So great presentation, lots of thoughts, but that's the one I wanted to get out there.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Anything else down to my left? Commissioner Ulrich?
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't want my comments on exit interviews to color, you know, my feeling or give the impression that I'm, less than happy. I'm very happy with our staff and the work of our staff and employee relations and this team we have and the work we're doing. So I want that to be the overriding thought. I just had that concern about extra reviews, that maybe we could beef that up. But I don't want those comments to create a negative impression.
Well, and I was going to make a comment on that as well. I mean, we've got the survey out there. It's tough to, I mean, we'd love to, hey, okay, tell us the truth, nothing but the truth. And sometimes a survey can get to some of that. And I just want to point out that on the record, it was mentioned that that's an anonymous survey. So we can just hit that again, that we're not somehow backtracking through that chip that was implanted. Just a little joke. That they are anonymous, so they can feel free to answer as much or as little. If they need to take the 24-hour rule, so we get the real information, that would be helpful. It's anonymous, and it's helpful. It's helpful getting that information. So while we've got that tool, let's. It is anonymous, right?
It is
it's anonymous. I just want to point that out. It is anonymous. And I've always said, I mean, man, come to this county, I didn't know what I was getting into. I mean, into the county government. Government in general kind of makes me a little bit. That's a generality, not specific to here. We've got some really good people in this place.
Yes, there are.
And like any other organization, we've got some duds too. I mean, that just is what it is, right? It just is what it is.
That's my common sense survey.
It just. And so we trying to do the best we can with what we got, and you guys do a great job. I will say, I'm a little disappointed with this Zoom because it kind of went well. I was hoping we'd have some material for our Scott County Live, like the SNL skit. We only had one cat go through. I mean, I can only see so many video. And then Carrie, I don't know if she's on there, but I mean, the boldness of her to have the kitchen window or the kitchen in the background is impressive, to have a clean kitchen, and then the audacity to have a sun-drenched window in the background way to look at. It looks clean. It looks clean. The sun's shining. I can see the leaves. I mean, wow.
The waffles.
Yes, yes. So, good job. Using. I know it can be. We're still learning how to be. Ask questions over somebody because it can be a little awkward. So we're getting there.
You're great.
We're getting there. So thanks for embracing that technology. So with that, is there any other closing comments? Otherwise, we're going to move on.
There's not.
and
Just
keep the
thank
ball
you
rolling.
for your patience this morning and for the good conversation.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, while we're transitioning, let me
Yeah.
tell you, last night I was introducing at a Zoom meeting for a small city council in western Minnesota. We were setting up a zoning ordinance change. And I was in my office with my window open, and a couple of the neighborhood kids got in a squabble right outside the window. I had to excuse myself from my introductory remarks a minute ago, close the window. And
Right.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, you always just blame it on the virtual background.
Sure. It was a realistic background.
All right, we can keep moving. Deb's in place. So we're going to move to item number 6, which is the consent agenda. We're going to read through these items, which have been vetted through staff, of course, and will pass in one motion. So let me go ahead and read what we have on the agenda. 6.1, approve the agreement for receipt of funding in the amount of $50,000 from Casey Family Programs for Scott County Children's Services to support prevention work in 2020. 6.2, adopt resolution number 2020-118, entering into a grant agreement with the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs for an operational enhancement grant. 6.3, adopt resolution number 2020-120, awarding a contract to Molnau Trucking LLC for the 2020 building demolition project in the city of Savage and the townships of Blakely and Cedar Lake. 6.4, adopt resolution number 2020-121, authorizing entering into an agreement with Xcel Energy, Inc., to relocate its underbuilt electrical distribution line to provide vertical clearance for installation of traffic signals on County Highway 27 at its intersection with Connolly Parkway in the city of Savage. And I can almost see Commissioner Ulrich out there with his ball peen hammer getting that traffic count up. That's a little sidebar. 6.5, adopt resolution number 2020-122, awarding the contract to Cone, Inc. for the 2020 Justice Center Elevator B modernization project in the amount of $127,168. 6.6, adopt resolution number 2020-124, authorizing entering into an agreement with SRF Consulting Group, Inc. for preliminary design services for the Merriam Junction Regional Trail in Louisville Township. 6.7, adopt resolution number 2020-127, approving a contract increase of $332,821.21 to Ames Construction, Inc. for the Trunk Highway 16941 and County Highway 7814 Freight Mobility Project in Jackson and Louisville Townships. 6.8, approve record of disbursements and approve claims. 6.9, adopt resolution number 2020-125, adopting the payable 2021 final levy of $40,000 for the Cedar Lake Improvement District. 6.10, approve the request for rezoning of 3 acres from RR1 Rural Residential Reserve District to RR2 Rural Residential Single Family District. Diane Jackson, applicant and property owner in Section 13 of Spring Lake Township. 6.11, approve payroll processing of personnel actions. Those are the 11 items on consent.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull 6.7 for some brief comments and a question to staff.
Like a full-on poll, you want to pull in for, okay?
Just pull it.
All right, so we want to pull 6.7.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the other 10 items, and I just, well, I'll put the motion on the table, I have a comment.
Sure, so we have a motion to approve consent
I'll
minus
second that.
6.7, and a second. Any further discussion on that?
I just want to point out, I'm happy to see the grant receipts, very important grants for our preventing child abuse and neglect and our veterans, you know, and that business is still happening. We get kind of overwhelmed with COVID and what's going on, but staff are doing a good job continuing to seek those outside funds, some even private funds, not just tax dollars,
Right.
to continue this important work. And that's important to realize because we can be overwhelmed with just the day-to-day of what's going on now. So I just want to give a shout out for that, and I'm really happy to see that.
All right, so we have a motion, a second. Deb is ready to take us away for consent minus 6.7.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf. Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right, can we go right to 6.7 and have its own, do we need to renumber that, Deb, or is it just keep it on its own? Okay.
Thank you,
So-
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
This is, it was on consent, it's probably just a straightforward change order or something like that, but the number is so big.
It is.
And it's a significant project in Scott County and in the region. So I wanted staff just to give us the 25-cent explanation on what this was about, and I'm presuming that in a few moments I'm going to move its adoption, but let's have the explanation about the change order for Ames Construction.
Well, Lisa's here to give us the whole $50, so not even the 25 cents. So take it away, Lisa, on 6.7, please.
Okay, as you will recall, when we approved this item originally, we set a threshold for coming back to you when change orders reached a certain threshold level, and we're definitely now at that point. I think the big item on this is that we had some storm sewer that was not appropriately designed in the original plans, and as a result of it, we've had to work with the contractor to, once we got the plans done of what it should have been, to go back and rebid that work. And we're still negotiating, so hopefully that number will come down, but we want it to be able to move forward with that work here in the next couple of weeks. So that's why we had to bring it to you at this point. So hopefully the number will actually go down, but it's pipe work and it's $254,000 for that item alone. So since we were bringing this forward to you, we had a couple of other smaller items that were approved as change orders. Since we brought this back to you in, I believe it was November, for a contract increase. Those items also include some utilities that were relocated, were not relocated to their correct locations, and they resulted in a conflict. As you'll recall, utilities out there, we need to get the private utilities to move things, and sometimes they don't move them to the right place. Also, we had an incentive clause for completing the bridge down there. That's the 2 box culverts over Pica Creek. And the contractor did perform and meet that incentive, so they were paid that $50,000 for completing it prior to the date that had been specified in the contract. There was also some business signing that we worked with businesses out there to try to improve access during construction. That's been a point of concern for many of them. And so that business signing cost increase was not part of the original contract. And then, let's see, then there was a very small change order for some electrical utility work. So that's what makes up this change order. I'm thinking that this will be the last one, hopefully, that you will see related to the work out there before you approve the final contract.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Lisa, for the explanation. I noticed you say no fiscal impact. Remind us where are the funds to cover that, or did we have contingency in the original budget?
Yes, as you will recall, we had some money. The bid came in below what we had budgeted, so we set aside a portion of those funds to cover these contract increases, which generally are normal. I think we're still below what is considered to be unacceptable or where you really have problems with your plans. But we had set aside, let's see if I can find it here.
A number bigger than this.
Yeah, we had set aside quite a bit of money. We actually still have 2.2 million still set aside for the final contract closeout. So we did have ample money to cover this particular contract increase, as well as there's still money set aside in case we have differences between this increase and the final contract amount. So.
And can I ask Lisa, Mr. Chair, it said in the thing it'll be done in the fall of 2020. Are we still on a pretty good schedule?
Yeah, we anticipate most of the real roadway work will be completed somewhere around the end of September. There will obviously be a lot of cleanup work that needs to be done, turf establishment, those kinds of things along the corridor that will occur after that. We're hoping we'll have all the major work done so that we can go ahead and start working on contract closeout after the construction season this fall.
Mr. Chair, Lisa, what about the recent kind of discoveries and issues related to the work on 41? None of this impacts that, and are we going to see any costs because of that, or won't those be our responsibility?
So what happened is we found some pavement that dates back to over 50 years ago.
The good old days.
Underneath the roadway, and that all needs to be removed. We don't know the exact dollar cost of that, but we're thinking it should be below $50,000 in extra work. We are having discussions with MnDOT, since that's their roadway, not our roadway, to see if we can get them to contribute. If we can, that'd be great. I'm not counting on that because of the way that the contract reads with them. Any changes in the field were to be our costs. Their contributions were capped. So we'll continue to see if that's possible, because this is rather unique, and none of the information that they provided to us prior to construction indicated this issue. So it wasn't something we planned for in the work.
And is it just a stabilization issue, or is it materials issue, or both?
Well, I'm not the best at describing what that problem is, but when you have that old material underneath the roadway and you're disturbing what's on top of it, you do create a stability issue. And so we had this similar issue when we constructed one of the frontage roads on the old 169 roadbed up there in the Buena Vista area. And so basically the best thing to do is to remove it, bring in the right kinds of materials to stabilize the roadbed, and then repave it. And so that's what we're doing right now. And as a result of that, that work's going to extend the closure on 41 from what we had originally hoped would be about a half a month to a full month closure.
So with all that fun news, how are we doing with the businesses? I know we got signing in here, but like communicating in that and making sure people can sort of find their way in
Keeping
and out?
people out of Carver County and those Carver County people.
Oh, that's I missed that. Let me,
The big thing is it does impact the people who use that road from Carver County. It puts them on 101.
Right.
The good news is that we already had that detour signed for this work. It's going to be a little bit longer. The businesses that have access off of 41, we have accommodated them through, they have kind of like their own little exit ramp. I drove through it on Sunday just to kind of check it out on southbound 169 that gets them into the frontage road system so that they can get over to like Demcon Drive. And then the 133rd Street entrance has been temporarily reopened to allow them to get southbound. What this does mean though is that people, in order to get to certain directions, have to go all the way down to County Road 14 to turn around.
right.
And for some folks, that I'm sure is annoying because it is a little bit of a distance. It's over a mile. So it's temporary. Hopefully it will be shorter than what we're communicating to folks, but at the current time, it looks to be about that much additional work.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that that is time, and time is money for those businesses.
Oh,
That
yeah.
is. So we're
Big
doing our
time.
best to get that done. And Lisa, I'd just ask, I think my colleagues would agree, if there's any advocacy help needed with MnDOT, because it does seem like they should acknowledge that they left that there years ago and didn't tell it, So I understand the contracting caps, and it's not a huge amount, but if at any point there is that needed, I mean, sometimes we need something to do, I guess, and you should use us for those things, so.
Yeah, we'll continue, once we get a better handle on what that cost is, then we're going to sit down with MnDOT and have discussions, and I certainly do appreciate the fact that you're willing to lend a helping hand to those discussions.
Sure. Well, and those are items that I have continuously been biting my tongue on. So I'm not, you asked the question, I'm not gonna go any more than that, because yeah, it's just like, come on. I'm all for being a good neighbor, but it's gotta be two-way. All right, anything else on 6.7?
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt resolution 2020-127, approving the contract increase of $332,821.21 to Ames Construction Incorporated for the Trunk Highway 169-41 and County Highway 78-14 Freight Mobility Project in Jackson and Louisville Townships, and move its approval, with thanks to Lisa for the explanation.
So we have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on 6.7 other than to say thank you? Try to keep that $2 million in the taxpayer's pocket.
We
Try to
shouldn't
keep
share
our.
that publicly. It creates.
I know. Try to keep our businesses in the loop, and yeah, it'd be nice to have that done. Any other discussion? Otherwise, Deb, please take it away.
Commissioner Weckman Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf. Aye. Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, we're going to move on to 7.1, where we are going to conduct a public hearing at 10 a.m., which is now 10:37. Thank you for your patience. And being asked to adopt resolution number 2020-126, adopting subsurface sewage treatment system ordinance number 4 and rescinding resolution number 2010-015.
Mr. Chairman, do you want a motion to open the public hearing, or you want to just declare it?
Well, we're going to need a motion, but are we going to have a little presentation first, or are we going to go right to the public hearing?
I can go right to public hearing. Mine's only just a one minute.
Okay, so then we need to open the public hearing, so.
I move that we open the public hearing for 7.1.
Oh wait, I heard something. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Otherwise, we need a vote to open that public hearing on said resolution.
Commissioner Weckman Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right, do we need to gavel that in? Just in case. Public hearing is now open. There's a rush. Rush. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Kate Savacho with the Environmental Services. So since there isn't a long line, I'll come up and give a little summary.
Thank you.
So this morning, we're conducting the public hearing, and we're requesting adopting Resolution 2020-126, adopting the amendments of the subsurface sewage treatment ordinance, and rescind Resolution number 2010-015, the current ordinance. So the subsurface sewage treatment system ordinance, or SSTS, and I'm just going to stop that, SSTS or septic ordinance. It was last amended in 2010. The intention of today's proposed amendments are to update that ordinance to ensure that it's consistent with state rules and state statutes, remove any redundant terms and definitions, clarify any ordinance language, and update the variance request process. So we have shared the amendments with cities, townships, septic professionals, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and the Attorney's Office, which might explain why there's not a long line to get up here, because everybody has seen it and they've had an opportunity to comment, and they've submitted written comments to us if they had any comments or things for us to consider. So we did receive some comments from septic professionals, and we did consider the comments as long as they weren't requesting us to be less restrict or conflict with state rules. It was in our purview that we had authority to do something that they were asking us to do. And lastly, that it wasn't, it doesn't conflict with our intention of the ordinance. Based on the comments that we received from septic professional staff, did make some changes. We added language that provided an alternative method to identify hydric soils with newly created lots. And in your packet, you'll see a copy of that ordinance with the changes highlighted. And then in front of that was just a real quick summary of changes where we said we clarified some language. What did that mean? How did we clarify it? To summarize for those that wanted to skip reading in depth the entire ordinance. So I believe that we've done a thorough and thoughtful job on these amendments, so I will go ahead, and if anyone would like to make a comment, they're more than welcome to now. Thank you.
I am not seeing a rush.
Mr. Chair, I would move to close the public hearing.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any other discussion on that? Again, I always just like to look down the hallway and just make sure there's not someone making a mad dash to get into this room. I'm not seeing that. No, I'm getting the nod. So let's vote to close the public hearing. Deb, please.
Commissioner Reckman Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right, the public hearing is now closed. Now we have a order to adopt resolution number 2020-126, adopting that resolution.
I would make that motion to adopt resolution number 2020-126.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Yes.
One quick question for Kate, if I may. Kate, over the years, I've heard from some septic professionals that every once in a while, new technology, new best thinking comes along on how we can handle on-site sewage treatment. The way to accomplish that is to go to the state. Would that be how that has to happen in Minnesota? It's not like they can come to individual counties or jurisdictions and say, let's try this new system and get permission for that. I guess I'm kind of backing into a question here, that if there are new technologies and better ways of doing things, it has to start at the state level and then trickle down to us, no pun intended.
Correct. So Commissioner Beard, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. So new technology is vetted through the state. You have to go through a process with the MPCA. You sign up, and then you have to go through certain criteria testing. Is it NSF? Can it withstand a Minnesota winter? Type of stuff. Once you get through that process, they then post the different technology that is available that counties, it's been vetted, approved, and then counties can go ahead and use them if it's allowed by your ordinance. So yes, you have to go to the state first, and then counties can take it from there when they apply for their permit.
And to be clear then, just the last follow-up, then in Scott County, we pretty much have anything that's permitted or allowed by MPCA, they can approach us for permits, when any homeowner wants to build, they can come forward with their best case scenario, and we can take a look at it as it fits that particular piece of land. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make a comment, or do you have a comment? That it, we workshop this, and the staff has been through this, taking it to the cities, the townships, et cetera, that it does, because I always get a little nervous when we're making ordinance changes, rightly or wrongly, just my reflex, that it does feel like you've gone through the avenues, given everyone an opportunity to have their say, and I also do feel like maybe you don't get the right answer, whatever the department is, right away, but if you take it up the food chain, you realize that, we, as a county, we've got certain rules we have to live with, but let's work things out the best way we can, and sometimes the answer is no. But I just have appreciated coming to that understanding. I just wanted to say that this does feel like one of those as well. So we have a motion, we have a second.
Thank you, Keith.
Otherwise, we'll have Deb come up and take us through this.
Commissioner Weckman Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right, that ordinance is approved. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 7.2, conduct a public hearing at 10:30 a.m., which is now about 10:45 a.m., and adopt resolution number 2020-119, adopting Scott County Ordinance number 31, a public health nuisance ordinance in Scott County.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we open the public hearing for 7.2.
Second.
Motion and a second to open the meeting. Any discussion? Otherwise, Deb, please.
Commissioner Weckman Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf. Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
Public hearing is open. And once again, I'm going to look out the window to see if there is and this too has been gone through the mill for years.
Years.
Yeah. How many? 3, 4? More than that, maybe. I don't know.
I think we're going on 4.
Yeah.
In COVID time, it feels a lot longer.
Yeah, that's true as well.
Good morning, Commissioner Beer and Commissioners. I did have a presentation, but it was mostly for the hearing, but since there are no individuals, I can save time and just kind of give a quick summary instead of going through my slides. As you mentioned, it has been years. This started with back in probably early 2018, when a local jurisdiction did contact us requesting us to streamline the process and create a countywide ordinance because they were struggling with this. Contacted the state, and the state was of no assistance to them. So we did take this to scale in January of 2018, and we, in partnership with the Service Delivery Committee, drafted some language for our public health nuisance ordinance in front of you. That was started with the clandestine drug lab ordinance that was already in place. The service delivery team has had an opportunity to review it, and they provided feedback in March of 2019. It was reviewed at chair, vice chair, and some feedback was incorporated. We also took this to several cities and townships and presented to them, and they had opportunities to present or to ask questions and provide some feedback. In a nutshell, what the ordinance does is establish a minimum standard for health, safety, and protection of parties who are going to possibly be or are being exposed to public health nuisances, should assist. It's really another tool in the toolbox for the locals because they do not have statutory authority to intervene or declare a public health nuisance. So we would be a resource to our local city, particularly law enforcement. Our county attorney, or assistant county attorney, Jeannie Anderson, has gone through it and cleaned it up, and we believe that this ordinance would be a benefit to the county. It's also another entity that has opportunity to have gone through it is Kate Sedlacek from Environmental Health Services. We would be working together with them, and she has provided some feedback as well. So we are looking, this really creates a partnership to work with the cities, work with our local law enforcement, environmental health services. Particular concerns that had been raised previously from some local jurisdictions were related to agricultural practices, including dead animal carcasses. We have added language in there to address those concerns, and that has met with their approval. So in sum, we're just recommending that this ordinance be, well, actually this ordinance was a key recommendation in the Scott County 2040 comp plan, and we are recommending approval for resolution number 2020-119, adopting the public health nuisance ordinance.
Yeah, and I think that this is something that, I mean, you mentioned it, but I think sometimes, like, I always need to hear things 3-4 times, unless you're my bride, and 6 or 7 times she would say, but, no, she wouldn't. That this has been gone through. A lot of questions that came up were delved into to try to address a lot of the livestock issues. This went in and through scale to try to have, instead of 47 different ordinances and revisions, and just to make it a little bit more common, which is why that organization, one of the reasons why that organization does exist. So wasn't something that we were like, oh, what can we do? We were bored, we got nothing to do. That it came out of and through that process, which is awesome. And all those questions were addressed to make sure that those kinds of livestock issues were taken care of. So thank you for that. So we have a presentation.
It's a public hearing.
We have a public hearing, and I'm not seeing any more folks coming.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that portion of closing the public hearing? Otherwise, I'm going to lean over and just look. It gives me a better view. Otherwise, Deb, take it away, please.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf. Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right, that is approved after many, many, many years. Oh, I'm sorry, the comments. Sorry, we're closed. I was getting ahead of myself because I was thinking, man, we really put a lot of time into this.
Mr. Chair, I will make.
We got the motion for the adoption.
Resolution number 2020-119.
Motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that motion.
We got a second. Any discussion?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Yes.
I see. I'm a little like the last one was an ordinance change. I have no problems with changing, improving ordinances, putting new whole big ordinances in place. That philosophically is a little harder for me, but I want to thank the team that's worked so hard on this. And really, I do feel like has listened to concerns, has adjusted the language, and I know that there's still I think we have good buy-in from the jurisdictions for the most part. There's still a few people concerned out there, and I think what has helped them not be here today against ordinance is assurance by our public health department, assurance by our sheriff's office that this isn't going to improperly intrude on people's property and rights. And I always want to say, we're making this ordinance, but this body, whoever's on it in years to come, just like we did with the septic ordinance, can learn and grow and make things better. So I really feel like it's time, even though we've heard that there's a few people out there who still think that this is maybe unnecessary government. The majority have said, yes, we need it, and our jurisdictions have said we need it. And I would hope that whoever's here in the future will continue looking at it and learning from how it goes this first couple years. So that's all.
Mr. Chair, well put, Commissioner Brecky. One of the things that I wrestled with as this came to the scale Service Delivers Committee, because I'm your representative on that body. As we debated it for a couple of years, I went through all the jurisdictions, checked with our cousins over in Carver County who already have this, and this is modeled very closely on theirs. But we're always struggling with the personal liberty, private property, and the sacredness of private property, particularly when it comes to government intrusion on those things. But there are rare cases where what we do on our private property or in our personal lives reaches out and affects other people as well. Other people's property, other people's lives, and that's where we kind of have to have this balance. And as this came forward, I knew as it was making its way through the process, I thought, you couldn't have picked a more politically fraught time to bring this forward when we've got a COVID-19, or as I call it, the Wuhan flu pandemic going on, and big government, as you saw on page 29 of the previous presentation, takes drastic action which pretty much tanks the economy and puts 29 million people out of work. That's what government can do. And so I'm looking at this thinking, boy, now you want us to create a small county version of that that can allow it to actually touch people's lives. But there's a difference. There's a difference with this ordinance. First of all, I think we vetted it pretty thoroughly. Secondly, no one person can call this shot. There is no one with executive power to start moving in on people's property because you don't like the way they fence their cows or roll their cars over on the side out back or something like that. We are the final arbiter, the 5 of us sitting here, and that's what's built into this ordinance. If anybody disagrees with anything public health is doing, they come to the 5 elected officials that sit at this county, this board, and we are the final arbiter of whether a motion will go forward or an action by the government on private property will happen. So there is recourse with elected representatives with this ordinance, and that's the big difference and why I can support it, Mr. Chairman, especially in this awkward time when a lot of folks with good reason are thinking, what is the government doing to our entire economy? What's it doing to our system? This is not like that in that way, in that this is very rare, very focused, and at the end of the day, you can go to your elected officials and actually affect action if you need to disagree with the outcome. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I intend to support the new resolution.
Well, I would just say, I mean, for both of those comments, that was the saving grace for me, is that this wasn't, you know, some edict, because we've got public health. I'm looking in the room. I can see our sheriff on Zoom, giving you the wave, getting the wave back. That there was a spirit in this, that it wasn't an edict, that it wasn't a taking over, it wasn't a, it was for the greater good, and it wasn't going to be wielded heavy-handed, and there was, you know, folks you could talk to that represent those different recourse,
There's
basically.
an appeal process.
Exactly.
Very clear, yes.
So that did give me a lot of, I mean, it was saving grace to be able to support it. And I, with my own ears and eyes, what I would say one of the more cantankerous folks of the scale meeting, being able to ask those questions and get answers back. So it's like, it's not just, everyone had an opportunity and did have an opportunity to speak on, for, against, whatever, and those things were addressed. So I feel good about that. That it wasn't just, again, we're like, oh, we're bored, what do we do? Let's come up with a new one. No. Everyone had a voice, everyone still has a voice. So, I like that. That's good.
That gets us back on schedule.
Look at that. Perfect. All right, Deb.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf. Aye. Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right. Moving on.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we open the public hearing for resolution, or considering the resolution 2020-123.
I don't know that that's a public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry, it is
Yeah.
not a public hearing.
No, we're gonna get a little presentation here.
Well, never mind what I just said then.
I like it, but I see, we're all trying to get this thing moving, so 7.3, and I see Brad is coming, the masked man.
Masked up, yep.
So
Thank
your
you,
motion
Commissioner.
dies for lack of a second.
Yes, that happens from time to time.
That'd be the only time.
Thank you, Commissioners. So the public hearing for this item was held before the Planning Commission
That's what
last
public
month.
hearing
So
was,
we did
okay.
go through that formal process, but we instead did that public hearing in front of the Planning Commission. They have provided a recommendation to you that we'll talk about, and today we're looking for final action on the ordinance revisions. I've got a few slides just to give an overview. I know you've seen some of this information in a workshop and in the request for board action, but for those watching or streaming, I'll just hit some of the key updates that are being proposed in this ordinance. Talk a little bit about the process of how we got really good feedback throughout the last couple of years, and then what comments we've heard before the public hearing, during the public hearing, and then even after the public hearing. A couple of comments have come in, and I want to share those with you. So the purpose of our ordinances, both zoning and subdivision, really to promote the public health, safety, and welfare. We've done zoning here in Scott County since the 1970s. Every 10, 15 years, we tend to do a full update of our ordinances, really looking to provide orderly development of land in our unincorporated area. It used to be 11 townships, but with this update, we've made it very clear that Credit River Township will be adopting its own zoning and subdivision ordinance, and therefore this will now apply to those other 10 townships. It's a really an important document for staff, the township officials, your Board of Adjustment and Planning Commission, and even you as a board to refer to when we're making some decisions on permits and subdivisions in order to be consistent and predictable to landowners. They want to make sure that everyone's following the same rule book, and so this is the rule book. And with all ordinances, typically you have to follow state statutes, and they're listed there on the screen. I guess the other important thing to note is that we do this every 10 years. Once the comprehensive plan is adopted here in the county, we then take time and look at what official controls we need to update in order to implement the comprehensive plan. So the comp plan introduced some new ideas, some new zoning concepts, some new development ideas, and then we needed to really formalize those, put them into ordinance language, and that's what we've done here with this update. So the process, when we did talk about new zoning approaches or approaches to land subdivisions, we wanted to make sure that we're following kind of the best practices. Obviously, we're not alone in this. Communities across the nation do planning and zoning, so we can always learn a lot from our neighbors, both here in the metro, around the state, and then even beyond, taking a look at how different communities have approached issues. Notably, the hamlets was a new, somewhat new zoning concept that we're going to talk about. We do not have hamlet zoning here in the county, but our friends over in Goodhue County have had this type of zoning in place. We learned a little bit from them. Over in Wisconsin, we discovered that there was several counties that had this type of zoning, so we could learn a little bit from them.
Are you going to speak more about that in a few minutes?
Yeah.
Good. I want to hear about it.
A lot of workshops, a lot of topics. You need more than just a few minutes to cover. You need to think about what are the pros and cons of different ideas. So we had a lot of workshops with our planning commission. Sometimes we'd invite some stakeholders into those workshops, particularly around mining. We wanted to make sure that we were hearing directly from some mining interests. We had a lot of different meetings with our township boards to make sure that the supervisors were aware of what was being proposed, could give us feedback, and then frankly introduce even some new approaches or ideas that we had not thought about at staff, so that was really helpful. Had a couple of open houses, particularly around the Hamlet zoning district. Because this was brand new, we wanted to make sure that anyone that lives or owns property in one of our historic hamlets knew about this zoning, could come in, learn more about it, understand what would be allowed in this new district if it gets adopted, ask questions, get answers. It was really good. We had a good turnout on those open houses, led to a lot of good conversations, a lot of good follow-up. Back in April, we notified the town boards that we asked them to start officially reviewing and providing any comments to us over the next couple of months. As we approached the public hearing, we notified 78 landowners that their zoning would change if we adopt the map today. We wanted to make sure that they were on notice that their zoning will change, and we provided them what the changes will be and how it would impact their property. Last month held a public hearing, and today looking for that final step in the process. So, just briefly, some of the key revisions being proposed. We're looking at establishing 4 new zoning districts in the unincorporated area. One is a rural business reserve district. Second is a heavy industrial zoning district. Third is that hamlet mixed use overlay district. And then finally, a very specific district for our closed landfill in Louisville Township. So that was probably the biggest change and generated most discussion, I'd say, throughout this entire process. A few other things, looking at requiring some deeper home setbacks if you're developing along an identified bluff area. That's typically along the 169 corridor, along the Minnesota River, where we have most of our bluffland. Just getting those homes, those new homes that are going on lots a little bit farther back. Yes, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, Brad, is that because of the houses that slid down into, with heavy rains? The bluffs are not stable, is that why we did that?
That's been the primary reason. We know of 2 or 3 instances where that's happened, or there's a real threat that that could happen if there continues to be some erosion.
Okay.
And so the thinking is let's move those primary structures back a little bit further.
Thank you.
We are looking at opening up the accessory dwelling unit ordinance a little bit further. Right now, only a family member can occupy that ADU or accessory dwelling unit. We've had a few instances where it made more sense for the caregiver to be in that space. It made sense to us at a staff level, so that was something that we're proposing. Really, the biggest chapter that got a lot of most overriding was the mining chapter, setting new reclamation standards, new application requirements, new reporting requirements. Just a lot more, and I think we think better information on the mining operation so that everyone knows what's being proposed and we can better monitor during the course of the mining and then the reclamation afterwards. Really trying to be more clear on some site access requirements and when turn lanes are required for development. Right now, most of that language is in our subdivision ordinance. When someone comes in for a plat, we talk about this, but it's equally important when someone may not be platting their land, but they're coming in for a conditional use permit or an interim use permit. So we wanted to also talk more about that just in our zoning ordinance, so we made some of those adjustments. We're updating our sign standards for commercial uses, industrial and institutional uses. I think it's to be more in line with what we're seeing in some of our cities here in the county. It's in response to some of the transportation projects that have occurred, and some property owners are all of a sudden on a new interchange, and so they may want to have some different signage to attract their customers. We, I think, set a lot more clear standards for kennels and day parks, shooting ranges, just general recreational land uses. These are the types of uses that typically generate a lot of discussion when we go to a public hearing setting. And we wanted to just be more clear on what the standards are. So again, I think it's all about consistency. And it's about predictability. When someone comes in the door for the first time and thinks about doing a kennel, it can be much easier to explain, well, here's the standards you're going to need to meet. And they're not hearing some things right at the public hearing that they didn't know about. The fourth one there is something that our town supervisors really encouraged us to look at, and that is allowing larger sheds or outbuildings, accessory buildings on rural lots. So we've increased the size a little bit for certain size lots so people can get a little bit more square footage. The idea there is that there truly is a demand. A lot of people are buying homes out in the countryside so that they can have some larger outbuildings to store their different items. On the other side, we're hearing it too from people that just think it's a little more attractive to have these larger spaces so people can keep more of this stuff indoors and not parked outside on the driveway or around the house. In our rural single-family district, so this is a lot of Credit River Township and parts of Newmarket Township, we're dropping the non-wetland criteria, so should the ordinance get adopted today, we'll no longer ask how much wetland you have on your property and then subtract that before we determine what your density is at a 1 home per 10 acres. We did that 10 years ago in another district where we would subtract your non-hydric acreage before we calculated your density. So this is just a progression where we think that given kind of that permanency of this part of the county where we've agreed now over 2 comp plans that this is somewhat of a permanent rural land use, it's very unlikely that city sewer and water will ever come into this part of the county. We thought it made sense to maybe start dropping some of these acreage criteria and just let the land subdivide at its gross acreage. We've heard of a couple of home builders or people buying property that have come in with building plans showing fairly large garages attached to the home, sometimes even bigger than the home itself. And so that's a kind of a new, maybe not new, but it's something that more and more home builders are looking at. And right now our ordinance would not allow that to happen. We think it makes sense maybe on certain size lots and in certain of our, in a couple of our different zoning districts. So in our agricultural zoning districts and our urban transition reserve type zoning districts, we think that kind of building footprint might make sense. So we're proposing that. And then looking at trying to have a better permitting process when we do either hear about some land alterations that have created some drainage issues or someone is contemplating that. And we want to make sure we can get ahead of that and be able to review some of those activities and then permit them if they're not going to create any disruption on the neighboring properties. So those are the key revisions. This is the zoning map. There is not a lot of property. I mentioned there's 78 properties that are proposed for rezoning. Most of them are the dark purple heavy industrial zone properties, primarily in Louisville Township, a little bit of Sand Creek Township, a little bit of Jackson Township. So that's the predominant stretch of properties that are being proposed for rezone. The second color, I know it's hard to see on the map, but it's a darker kind of gray-blue color. That's the Rural Business Reserve, or RBR. That's probably the second most, that's the second largest group of properties that are being proposed for rezoning. Again, those are predominantly along Sand Creek and Louisville Townships and in Newmarket Township. So not a lot of residential properties, I can't think of too many at all that are getting changed. So it's really on that non-commercial side of things that we're doing the rezonings. And many of them were notified, many of them, once they received the letter, called us, just asked questions, got some clarifications, and we were able to work through any of those questions with them. So only 3 townships gave us what I'd say is more formal or written notice of their recommendations. The other townships either, well, gave us no recommendation, but frankly I take that as a sign as that they had no opposition. You can read there that Helena had no opposition, Spring Lake, no opposition, no questions, no comments. Louisville Township is the township that gave us probably the most feedback, and they supported a different lot size in the heavy industrial zoning district. Before the public hearing, we were proposing a 10-acre minimum lot size in that district, but after we thought about it some more and looked at the types of uses that were being permitted, we thought it would make sense to lower that size down to 2.5 acres so it matches what's also allowed in the light industrial district. They also recommended a change to 4 parcels that would go from light industrial to heavy industrial. They're highlighted in light blue. It's a little bit difficult to see, but I think I can use my arrow, but it was the parcel here just off of 41, and then 3 parcels in this area right at the end of Demcon Road. Staff agreed with both of those and recommended those changes when we were at the public hearing.
Brad, what's the purple there that runs along the railroad tracks? That's mining district now, or what is that?
It's a light industrial district, and
light?
Yep, it's light industrial, but it's just the railroad corridor itself. And actually, as you pointed out, it might be something we could clean up because it's really just a right-of-way of the railroad itself.
No, Mr. Chairman, Brad, I'm not concerned about the railroad right-of-way. What I'm concerned about is the kind of businesses that would need a railroad would probably be more like I-1 or I-2. Is that what we preserved along there? Because what I don't think we want are strip malls and apartment buildings next to a freight railroad, where if we have a business like, say, a can plant or some big heavy processing business that needs rail access, should be able to build in that zone. Is that possible in what I'm looking at here on this chart?
Yeah, Commissioner Beard, I understand what you're asking. So you're correct. The dark purple is that heavy industrial, which would be the rail-oriented type uses.
Got it.
And you can see it's predominantly that color, except for this parcel is in that light, and this one is being changed now to that heavy industrial as well as these.
Good. Okay.
And I believe the light is just a reflection of what's there today, and it was the best match for going into that lighter district.
And to be clear, an I-1 could go into an I-2 parcel if that's what they wanted to build, correct?
Good question, Commissioner Beer. So our comp plan, it just says it's industrial. It doesn't specify whether it's light or heavy, so a person can just rezone
Okay.
back and forth
All right.
without having to go through a more lengthy comp plan amendment.
Okay, good. I'm jealous of the industrial park concept along 169 and the Union Pacific Railroad. That's something this county was blessed with, and the industrial park here in Shakopee. We need a new one, and my thinking is, I think everybody's thinking is, it's moving along the corridor to the south and west. So we want to protect that if we can. Thank you.
So that rounded out the township comments. Then when it came to individual property owners, we heard from Melkerson Sales, Brine Rock Products, that owns a lot of acreage in that exact area you were just referencing, Commissioner Beard. They too are looking at a lot of their property moving into that heavy industrial or I-2 district. And they're the ones too that really asked, should we look at the minimum lot size that was being proposed? They were advocating going back down to 2.5 acres to match what's allowed in the I-1. Staff agrees. Demcon and Mark Paul, they're the ones that were requesting some of the map changes that I just showed earlier. So those 4 properties that I'm pointing out really came from Mark Paul and Demcon companies, just looking at their long-term plans and thinking they might be better suited for that heavy industrial zoning classification. The SMSC formally provided a comment. They own property in Sand Creek Township near the By the Yard facility. And their property was being proposed to go from urban business reserve to rural business reserve, and they were fine with that change, and they just wanted us to know that. We had 2 property owners that lived either within the boundaries of the Lydia Hamlet proposed district or just outside the boundary. They attended the open house event, so they were providing us comments back then and wanted to stay informed of the process. And we had one property owner submit written comments that I shared with the Planning Commission. And then we had one resident that attended the public hearing and spoke right here where I'm standing, expressing some concern that some of the uses that are being proposed in the Hamlet mixed use, particularly gas stations and convenience stores, would be a real disruption to their quiet Hamlet setting. And so they really just wanted to go on record that they were not in favor of the Hamlet mixed use zoning district. Beverly Keenan is a property owner who owns property in Sand Creek Township. Her parcel was proposed to go from urban business reserve to rural business reserve to allows a little bit more development options on that property and not just sit idle until city sewer and water come to the property. She provided written comments both at the public hearing, and I think she's also followed up with additional written comments. She wanted a little more time to understand the difference between the 2 zoning districts, have a chance to talk to her family, and really she can stay in the current zoning district that she is today, and that would be the UBR, or move to the RBR. And so I informed Ms. Keenan that I'll really leave that up to you and your family to decide which zoning you want to do, and know that if you stay in the UBR today, at some point, if you or someone else in the family want to rezone, you can do that and be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So after a lot of discussions with her, and the decision was to maintain the current zoning at UBR, and so staff is recommending that we just keep it that way.
Mr. Chairman, Brad, I talked to Bev on the phone the other day, and I'm reading her letter here, the one I got home in, this one here. She's under the impression that it's never been UBR. She thinks it was rural vacant land. That's my first question. What is it? Is there rural vacant land, non-homesteaded rural vacant land, or is it actually UBR and she's not aware of it?
Yeah, so it's a couple of different terminologies that we're dealing with. That rural vacant land is really how the property is being assessed.
Oh.
And taxed. And that is very true. That is how the property is being assessed and taxed for valuation purposes. But her zoning's a little bit differently.
Okay.
And her zoning was, I believe, A1 agriculture until about 2000. And then when we did this last full update in 2000, it moved from A1 to UBR. And we talked a lot about that switch. And so her zoning is UBR, but I agree with Bev that it has been assessed and valued as rural vacant.
So, Brad, going forward, if it was to change to RBR, would her taxation classification change? It would still be non-head, so that would have no impact on her. And for her to enjoy her 30-some acres as she sees fit, that wouldn't change either, would it?
Yeah, right, Commissioner Beard has really assessed and valued at how the property is being used today, and that would not change regardless of what zoning classification she's in.
Okay.
And for her desired use of the property to maybe at some point put a single-family home on the property, she can do that with any of these zoning districts that we've been talking about.
Okay, thank you. And you'll help her understand that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just to follow up, as long as we're on her issue, so your recommendation is to leave it UBR, and that's part of the resolution that is in front of us, so we don't need to make a change to accommodate her desire, which in my mind is really just, and this is great, it's her choice. In many of these changes, we're giving people more flexibility and more rights, but she's saying, I don't want that, and we're okay with that, I think. I mean, I have no problem with it.
That's what she wants.
Yeah, so, and you'll communicate with her later today when we're done, right?
Correct. Yep, you are correct in every statement there, Commissioner Weckman. It is part of the action that you'll take, is that it will be UBR.
Thank you.
Yep. So back on July 13th, the Planning Advisory Commission made a formal recommendation in this resolution. I believe it's in your packet. And they did that unanimously. I think all 7 approved it. The only reason I paused is I can't remember if one was missing. I don't think so. So I think all 7 did recommend approval. And that's all I have for you. I can stand for any questions.
Nice. Any additional questions?
Just a few comments, just thanks to you and all the others, I was gonna say your department, but it's people from many departments who've worked on this. I feel like you've done a great job getting in the community, working with jurisdictions, taking in comments. I appreciate how you've shared with us the specific comments and then the results. One thought I had as looking at that now, because I love that format, if I'm somebody just watching, I might think, oh, so if I just call and say I don't like something, they change it. Well, I think that's a balance. The things that were proposed, they were considered, it fit within the whole picture, didn't cause harm to any neighbors, that type of thing, because I see that we didn't do that in one place. 2 people said, hey, we wish gas stations wouldn't be part of the Hamlet Overlay District, which again is a huge increase in property owner rights for what they might do with their properties. And because lots of other people kind of agree with, well, if somebody finds it economical to put up a gas station on Highway 13, and they meet all these other criteria, it's not like there's not other criteria, we're going to let them do so. So I just wanted to bring that up. It's not just call and staff will do whatever you want. It's within the goals and parameters of the whole thing. But I am very happy with how this has went, and I feel for the most part we've increased property rights, and in the place we haven't, with the drainage issue, very much like Commissioner Beard was talking about later, earlier, sorry, we're not later yet, when there's times when we're influencing and negatively influencing our neighbors, as I think many of us have dealt with in the past years with water issues with neighbors, we need to be involved. That is the role of government then. So we're staying on theme today, guys. Good job.
I know it.
Brief question, Brad, on the mining interest. When folks made some comments regarding the mining section, which you mentioned it was the biggest amount of changes, the most rewriting happened there on the reclamation thing. I'm aware back in my stomping grounds in the mountains, Pennsylvania, when the mining regulators rewrote some of the reclamation things, the effect, and it might have been intended, was to basically drive all the mom and pops out of business. And so the big guys with all the money could take over the mining business, whether it was clay or iron or coal or whatever it was. How were the comments accommodated here? And are we still allowing mom and pop to be able to do sand and gravel and reclaim at a reasonable rate? And we haven't set the bar so high that we're going to end up with just Browning Ferris Industries controlling the entire
Yeah.
business. Nothing against Brown and Ferris, but I'm just grabbing a big company name, so.
Good question, Commissioner. You know, a lot of these changes were based on a lot of different applications, so it wasn't just one user that came in and said, let's make all these changes. It really reflects changes that came up when the proposal was in Belle Plaine in the Orderly annexation area. That was a smaller operation, smaller pit. And it ranged from kind of reflecting on some of the larger projects in Sand Creek, some of the frac sand. So I'd say it really reflects the whole gamut of sizes and types of operators that we really thought about making sure that the standards work for everyone, not just the largest user. The feedback was really good. I think all the comments that we heard, we worked through. I can't think of many that were sticking points that we dropped at the end of the day. I think we were able to accommodate just about every proposal. And I'm trying to think of any other answers, but I think we got good feedback. At the end of the day, the group that was watching this the most closely was satisfied with what they're seeing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I got no comment. I'm sure people would have called me to complain had there been something sideways or that they thought was going to be detrimental, particularly the little guys, and I heard nothing. So I just wanted to make sure that was covered. Thank you.
Yeah, I would jump on the same idea that this does feel like, hey, you know, we don't need to do this restrictive thing with the wetlands, so let the land be what it is, so we can remove that. We saw, you know, some letters from an individual that made it to the slides that, you know, the county was listening to a person or a person's family. The answer sometimes may still be no, but sometimes it's yes. It's, you know, help me understand. And so I've always heard really good comments about your group, the fellows behind the pillar outside. Even sometimes when the answer may not be the one that you're looking for, there always feels and seems like there's a willingness to like, hey, let's get this figured out. What way makes the most sense? So, man, as a county, that's all we can ask for. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we adopt Resolution 2020-123, adopting revisions to the Scott County zoning ordinance number 3 and Scott County land subdivision ordinance number 7.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion on this item? Otherwise, Deb, please take it away. Thanks for all the good work and listening ears. It's super important.
Commissioner Weckman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
All right, that is approved. Thank you very much. We're going to move along to 8.1. Adopt resolution number 2020-128, authorizing development of schools, food support, and nonprofit assistance programs entering into subrecipient agreements with invited organizations based on documented COVID-19 related expenses, utilizing $1.2 million from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, CARES, Special Revenue Fund to fund these grants, and amending the Special Revenue Fund budget to reallocate $1 million of the funds designated by Resolution 2020-115 for these purposes to the Housing Assistance Program for CARES Act Special Revenue Fund. Do I have to repeat that?
What was that you said?
Exactly, what I just said.
I didn't
What I
catch
just
that.
said.
I feel like we've been frequent flyers here. So
Well,
do you
yeah.
get any extra mileage out of this?
Oh, yeah, plenty.
Okay. Well, we're here today to talk about the last of the funding buckets that we have been discussing with this CARES money. So just a quick recap about the program. Congress passed the CARES Act back in March. It provided assistance for workers, families, and small businesses. And it was an attempt to try to preserve jobs for American industries. There was a subsection of that bill that identified a funding for state, local, and tribal governments. And our allocation of that funding, which came by executive order from the governor, was just over $17.7 million. There's several criteria that are required for that funding, but there are 3 elements that this funding has to meet in order for us to spend it. appropriately. It needs to be a necessary expenditure that was used in response to the public health emergency. It can be our expenses that were direct response to the emergency, or it can be like a secondary response to help with economic support or organizational support for the interruptions that have been caused by the event. Costs need to be accounted for in our, costs that we use to spend this money on can't be accounted for in a budget that was in place as of March 27th. And it needs to be, any costs that this money is used for needs to be incurred during what we call the covered period, which for us is between March 1st and December 1st of this year. There are a number of things. We had a board workshop to discuss how you wanted us to proceed with using these funds. And the focus that we heard was you wanted us to make sure we are finding ways to get people back to work. We want to support the survival of business with the concept that if employees are working, they can take care of their families, they can pay their rent and mortgage, they can buy food and all those kinds of things. So that was our first focus for how we spent this money or utilize this resource. You did not want double dipping, so programs that had already aided people, like the unemployment insurance, the PPE program, or the PPP program, or other programs that were passed under the umbrella of coronavirus relief, were supposed to be considered and deducted from any grants that we provided or any assistance that we provided. The focus is to help businesses and organizations and people that have been, our residents that have been harmed by the pandemic. Food support was an area of concern and supported target rental and mortgage programs and distance learning, and of course childcare for essential workers. So on the 21st of July, you recommended that we move forward with expenditures in several areas. They included business support at $5.5 million, food security at $2.2 million, housing security at $2 million, and then rural broadband at $1 million. And then on August 4th, as a next step, we established a special revenue fund through an action that you took. And also at that same meeting, we adopted 3 separate resolutions related to it that established the local business support program, the housing security program, which kind of was intertwined with also some state agency programs related to housing, what we refer to as the Coronavirus Housing Assistance Program, and the CARES funding that we received. And then the final bucket that we talked about and passed a resolution on was the rural broadband support at that meeting. We committed to you that we'd be back with the remaining piece, which is the schools, food support, and nonprofit agencies bucket of funding. And that, just to refresh your memory, was for $2.2 million. And this is just a quick summary of how we're recommending to you today that those funding distributions be allocated out. We're recommending $750,000 for schools, $60,000 for food distribution centers, $180,000 for food shelves throughout the county, and then $150,000 for nonprofit organizations. Just a little background, we also are recommending that we redirect $1 million of funding from this bucket into the housing support, primarily because the state did not fund through the CHAPS program that I just mentioned, the level that we were hoping to for the suburban counties. So in order to make up that gap, we're recommending that money be shifted over to the mortgage and rental assistance programs. And then there's 60,000 of funds that we are kind of soft in our recommendations on. And so what I'm gonna do is have Chris go through the details for you, and then we'll be here to answer any questions you might have.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. So the first category of spending is around school supports. And we looked at, as really, I guess just as an introduction as we go through these next few slides, we really looked at this because it's kind of it's a softer bucket of spending. It's less clear who or where the money would be going. And so we had to try to develop a way to think about this that was consistent and fair. And so we really did sort of crosswalk this with the strategic planning priorities that you've set. And we heard about, we want a strong local economy. We want people to have access to food. We want to build and maintain a network of nonprofit agencies to partner with us. We care about kids. We care that they're educated. We care that they can read and that they're well, and that those things support our future as a community. And so we started with school supports, and we looked at the idea that schools have incurred substantial expenses, some of which they have been reimbursed for. There was a large allocation of money last week, $250 million statewide. And so we did hit the pause button as we were preparing for today to say, wait, is this what we want to do? But several of us on this team attended a webinar last week where the Department of Education folks were very clear that school expenses are going to significantly exceed the allocations that they were awarded last week. And so we would like to continue to support schools, specifically for the childcare expenses for essential employees that kept people working and continue to keep people working, and that there are some technology needs that schools have documented that are not covered by other funding. That would be the criteria that we would have to receive information from the schools that the expenses had not been funded through another source. This is what a local picture looks like for the Scott County CARES money allocations. These are our recommendations. We calculated for every school in Scott County what their student enrollment numbers were. And then for the border schools, we asked those districts to provide numbers with regard to Scott County students, K through 12. And so the allocations then made by, we just took $750,000 and gave it as a percentage, and we came up with those allocations. Interestingly, the state funding to the schools is almost to the dollar, 10 times what our allocations are. So that just gives you an idea of where each of the districts would land as far as a sizable state grant, and they're still going to have expenses that are not covered. With regard to food supports, we had came to a little bit of a dilemma because we have two that are large and the volume is substantial. CAP and Esperanza have now merged, and they provide services to the county as a whole. They provide services Monday through Friday, and they are a feeder system for the smaller food shelves. And so just by virtue of their size and volume, we elected to award, or to recommend that you award $60,000 to that one organization. To the local food shelves, we're recommending $20,000 grants, and we would invite them to submit information about their costs. We would pay two costs. We would pay their costs related to COVID, not otherwise covered, but not to exceed $20,000. And most of the food shelf programs that we talked to gave us a range of between $1,000 to $20,000. There were a few outliers, but most were within that range. I thought one of the things that I just really wanted to pass on to you is that as we were collecting this information, what we heard is that philanthropic giving in our communities has really sustained the food support programs, and that the needs have not been as significant as we were expecting they might be, because people have just really stepped up and supported those food support organizations, which is just a great thing to know about our communities. The next bucket was in nonprofit agencies. And so this was a tough area, and we've had a lot of discussion and lots of sharing of ideas around this. And so what we considered and what we would recommend to you is that we set some priority on the nonprofits in our community that would be eligible for this money. And so the first criteria would be that they provide an essential service, particularly those organizations that provide services to our most vulnerable residents. And there we're looking at organizations like PROACT, we're looking at Beacon, maybe some of the mental health pieces, the housing pieces, any of those essential services that are not food related. We gave priority to organizations that were either headquartered in Scott County, that had a physical presence here, or that provided a substantial level of service to Scott County residents. And we did that because there aren't very many, right? That's part of our strategic plan, is to bring more in. There aren't very many nonprofits that are headquartered here, but we could perhaps change that through these working relationships. We're doing this with a goal of sustaining services that have been in place for vulnerable residents, because if these services aren't maintained, we have really vulnerable people who are going to have really detrimental effects and potentially community-wide effects. So what we're proposing for nonprofits is a support program that looks similar to the small business supports. So we would look at what are their expenses incurred within the recovery period related to COVID that have not already been funded in another way. And we would recommend grants up to $15,000. That's the same dollar figure that we used for small businesses. As Lisa referenced, because of the significant reduction in the money we got from the CHAP grant, we're recommending that $1 million be reallocated to housing, and that would bring them up. That would bring the rental assistance program up to the level that we talked about when we were here on August 4th. And specifically, it would be $800,000 to rental assistance as the most hard-hit part of that program, and $200,000 to mortgage assistance.
Mr. Chair, Chris, the splits you have there, 800 and 200?
Yes.
Is that adjustable if you find out that the need is actually?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And we met this morning, we're in final stages in those contracts, and we have October 1st and November 1st reporting requirements, so we can monitor spending and adjust if we need to, so that we can help the most people possible.
Thank you.
And the last thing, if you do the math on that, there's a remaining balance of $60,000, and there seem to be a lot of, we'll have food shelves that'll submit expenses. We don't know exactly how much that'll be. We have nonprofits that will submit. We don't know exactly how much that'll be. And so we needed a way to have some flexibility to move money. We do have some priority to return money to these buckets, so to speak. If there's balance remaining, it could go back to housing, could go back to food, could go back to nonprofits, or we're still carefully looking at what is the access for low-income families to affordable, adequate internet services, and making sure that kids can get online to do school. So we would stand for questions at this point.
I just would have one. I'm glad to hear about the double dipping, because the first thing I thought was, what stops, like Lakeville, I think, can get from 3 different counties, maybe, and they said, well, let's fix up our budget a little bit for that, so I'm glad to hear that there's going to be some eyes on that, so
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
I spent some time on the phone talking through these issues with Lisa. I do like that with schools, we just went per capita. I mean, I think it takes some of that subjectivity out of it. I like the different buckets. I really like the flexibility. I think we just need to get the opportunities out there, because we don't have that double dipping, because it has to be COVID related. You know, we'll see how it goes. You'll come back to us if we need to make big adjustments that aren't part of this resolution. So, I think that's all good.
I keep coming back to my questions on double dipping, and there was a slide. Can you go back to that slide that's got all the different colored bar charts, or vertical, horizontal bars, I guess they were. Okay, yeah, no, one more forward, that one. Was it that one? Oh, yeah. So in voice, I heard no double dipping, but in here it's the gray bar fill in the gaps that unemployment plus stimulus didn't serve. And so one of my big bugaboos is most people believe there's very limited dollars, even though as we're scrambling to get rid of them all, which is bizarre. But anyway, if we want to try to get it to those that haven't had, I'm just going to use my housing because that's one of the things we're talking about. If somebody was getting more money by not working and not choosing, in my opinion, to pay rent and mortgage first, move on to the next person that didn't get anything. Does that capture this?
So this captures a piece of it. I can't tell you that there would be no instances where that would happen.
And I also understand there are circumstances where
Yep.
A plus B and C still need D. I get that, but I just don't want, oh yeah, this person made more money, and oh, they got this, and oh, they got that, and this little piggy had none.
Right. So I think that there's two safeguards that will help mitigate it. It won't take that possibility off the table completely. But the two things are, one is that on every application we ask, what other assistance have you received? And so as we look at prioritizing things, we will have some of that information. And the second thing is, what is the second thing? Well, there's payments directly. Oh, I know. Yes, there are payments directly to landlords. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
But the third thing then to mitigate this is that we are looking at people who are current on their rent or their mortgage on March 1st. And so the idea is if you are paying your rent and mortgage all along, you are likely to continue to do that if you are able. And so I think those components lessen that risk, but it doesn't eliminate it.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put anyone over a barrel. I'm just like, trying to make this go as far as we can. So when we're asking that question, have you received any assistance? Do we say like extra unemployment or like X, Y, and Z or like?
The questions will list off different kinds of assistance so people know whether to respond yes or no to that. And we do have some ability to do some cross-checking with those lists, and we'll do that where we can.
I know it may sound like a Scrooge, but it's like trying to spread the wealth, so to speak, and that's even a terrible term. But so whatever we can do with that, and then with the food, the different $60 or $60,000 and $20,000, like what percent of that food dollar actually gets into mouths? Versus, it goes to that whole administrative thing versus, oh, now we're doing this, now we need $150,000 for a walk-in cooler, and oh, well, we're trying to get it to the people.
Yes. So we have had a number of those conversations related to the administrative costs, and with regard to the food supports, we are saying we are only going to pay for food, refrigeration, distribution expenses, and PPE. And so as those grants are going to be reviewed by an internal team here at Scott County to look at, is this a cost that is consistent with CARES Act criteria, and is it, not to say it's not legitimate, but is it consistent with your direction?
Right, because we're on the hook, right? I mean, we're ultimately on the hook, even if we give that money to whoever, that we're still on the hook. So when you get to some of those smaller food shelves, will they have some of the reporting? Because I know that was a fish concern, was maybe they don't have, the reporting capability. I'm assuming these audits are going to be gracious, that the spirit was to get it, to the people that needed.
Yes.
But in case you get the wrong person,
yes,
are we confident on that as well?
We are building
As we
in
can
again
be.
that mitigation by bringing it in-house to look at these applications. We're not looking at outside resources to screen these applications. And not that that's necessarily better or worse, but at least it gives us a little better ability to respond to your questions at the end of this when you ask us. We're going to have that firsthand knowledge.
All right. Any other?
Mr. Chairman, I'd,
Mr. Chair, I'll
Yeah.
put forward resolution number 2020-128.
Second.
that's what I was holding out for, to hear from Commissioner Allred.
Yeah, there we go. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion on this?
Let him do some heavy lifting.
Yes.
Nice work.
All right, Deb.
Commissioner Weckman Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
There we go. All right, thank you very much. Thanks for all the work. I know it's a heavy lift and we're all trying to abide and do the right thing in very short time frames. How you feeling about that?
You know what, it is, but I'll tell you, we have the daycare assistance piece was announced end of last week. Small business announcements are going out this week, like things are starting to move, so
Good.
that's good.
All right, thank you very much. All right, moving on to item number 9, committee reports and commissioner updates. I'm gonna look down to my right. Commissioner Weckman Brecky, please.
Thank you. Let's see, our last meeting was Tuesday, August 4th, and after that meeting, I think we all participated in workshops on the septic system ordinance and then a diversity workshop. On Wednesday, August 5th, I had my monthly meeting with the county administrator, Leslie Vermillion. On Thursday, August 6th, we had Justice Steering Committee over Zoom. It was really important. It's really important that these cross-departmental groups are meeting again, even though it is remotely, because they're all finding some issues. In this case, just getting people together from different departments to talk, we're able to solve some processes about fingerprinting and other things that have to do with our justice system. Also, a lot of questions and discussions on the building project. Tuesday, August 11th, had the AFSCME Labor Management monthly meeting. Some questions there from the employees representing the union about if Scott County was going to be going over and above at all on COVID-related absences, negative PTO banks, things like that. Lori handled that really well, and my point or my sharing of kind of, I think, what would be our thoughts is right now there are federal regulations in place till the end of the year, and we're going to follow those and we're going to do our best, but there's an awful lot of unknown in the next couple months. We're not going to, just because Hennepin County or somebody else is doing something, we're not going to proactively say how we're going to handle things come January, because I think there's a lot of unknown. So lots of discussion there, but I think it's good for us to know there's a lot of concern among employees too. Where are we? Friday, August 14th, was able to connect into Scale and hear from the school districts. I think that was nice to just hear from all of them. Monday, August 17th, I guess that was last night, Scott County Human Services Resource Council. That's one of our advisory councils. A lot of interest in the CARES money, how it would be helping businesses, mortgage, and rental assistance, and then just a lot of interest in the waivers that we have in place for the human service programs and how that's going. This morning, before this meeting, there was a NACO Human Service and Education Committee call with folks from the USDA Food and Nutrition Services, some of our waivers come from the state, but some come from federal, and I know our staff's a little concerned about getting appropriate notice when those waivers are up on the federal level.
Right.
That's one thing we're a little bit nervous of, because it could come at some inopportune times based on some of our other responsibilities, because it's not always that those waivers have lessened the workload. Sometimes they've just pushed the workload forward or up there, and I think we need to be really careful about that, because we could be in a situation then where we don't have enough staff to meet those regulations. So Barb Dahl was on that conference call, and once I heard her introduce herself too, I was like, whew, good, now I can just listen and she'll know what to do and say. Otherwise, an interesting thing calls I've had in the last couple of days, I think they've all been from folks in Commissioner Beard's district, from different citizens who tend to be a little bit older, retired, more concerned about voting and with everything they're hearing with the Postal Service. And they are of the idea they don't want to vote in person for various reasons, and just been connecting them with Julie in our elections department, and she's been doing a great job explaining, because of course we have a process in place. We have mail-in and we have absentee. We have great processes in place, and I think we'll be getting more of that information out there just to help people understand their options. I don't think we're saying this is what you should do, but to understand those options. So those were the flavor of the last few days' calls. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and I assume everybody's been watching, but of course last week, local filing period closed, and we do have some contested races in our local cities, and I think Jordan, both mayor and city council, mayor of Savage, mayor and city council in New Prague. So there's some folks stepping up and interested in local government, which is a good thing. And yet I see in a couple townships, nobody's filed for seats, so that'll be some interesting write-in results that we'll see. I would assume it'll be some of our same friends who, if enough people write in their names, they'll continue doing that hard work. So that's the end of my report.
All right, thank you very much. Going to go all the way down to my left. Commissioner Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, again, as was just mentioned, on the 4th, we had workshop after the board meeting with the septic system, and of course the workshop on diversity. On the 6th, via Zoom, a transportation committee meeting. On the 11th, I participated in the CAP Agency Finance Committee meeting as Molly and the team continue to make great strides out there. And yeah, they've noticed that their private donations are actually up. They opened the thrift store. They had to close donations because with people staying home from work, people were cleaning out closets.
Oh, yeah.
And they were just getting buried, and the store was closed because of the COVID-19 thing. Well, the store's open again. And they've got deals, and they got a lot of stuff. Now, I don't know that they're still encouraging you to clean out your closets and bring it out, but anyhow, at least the thrift store is back in operation. AMC board on the 12th talked about what's going on around the state and about the special session which happened. The governor spent about 40 minutes with us on the phone from 11 o'clock to 11:45. Then at 12 o'clock they gavelled in a special session where they passed $20 million for personal care attendants, I believe, that work with the mentally handicapped, if I'm understanding that correctly. It was the only bill that passed unanimously, both bodies. Then they adjourned and went home. Then we had the MICA board meeting where we talked about what happened in that very brief special session. One of the things that the governor explained to us, and others as well, was that during the week that included that special session, there are bond sales that are happening, and so the state is in a 30-day quiet zone where they can't sell or monkey with credit rating or substantially change their budget. Excuse me. During that time, the state of Minnesota did sell $1 billion worth of bonds. Some of them were refinanced from previous bond issues. Some of them were bonds that were authorized in last year's bonding bill, but you know, they just don't run out and sell the bonds right away. They wait until the money is actually called for to execute contracts, and then they sell the bonds. The governor made a comment that it's almost like they're paying us to take their money. And somebody that's in the bond business will have to explain this to me, but the rate that we got, the state of Minnesota got last week was 0.135% on 20-year bonds. And apparently there's a discount some of the bond houses pay for the privilege of bidding on those bonds at that kind of a rate, which in effect sounds like they're paying us to take their money. Wow.
0.135?
0.135, that was the number that was thrown out. 20-year bonds, holy cow. So anyhow, ponder that. Oh, by the way, September 13th is the next special session, just between us. Expect the bonding bill to pass in September. 8/14 scale, and then that afternoon, the canvassing board to certify the results of the primary election in Scott County, and that's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, so Mr. Chair, can I just say, why wouldn't, instead of waiting until September, 13th for that extra session, why not do it today? Or is that a 1 month thing, so that they can keep on holding that?
I think that that's part of it, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Wolf. There is a 30-day zone that around the bond sale time when they want everything to be quiet and stable. That and the fact that it costs about $1 million a day to bring everybody back to St. Paul to hold a special session. And so the next one will be when he extends his executive emergency powers again in September. And it's fully expected he will do that again. That'll be the special session. And
So it's part of that 5-month, 2-week thing?
oh, the 5-month-long 2-week to flatten the curve, yeah, right,
Yeah.
you got it, yeah. No further comments on that. Just, speaking of elections,
Just
I jumped out of
asking
that a little too fast, and I'm hurried to jump back in. The mail-in ballots, Cindy said that there was something in the neighborhood of 3,400 ballots that were requested by mail. Now, this is beyond the absentee ballots, which is already a system that works and has been there for years. On the day after election, by law, do that sue and settle thing the Secretary of State did. Wednesday and Thursday, we, the county, had to count ballots that came back in the U.S. mail that had been postmarked by the 11th of August, which was Election Day. Over 700 ballots came back on Wednesday and Thursday that had to be opened and tabulated and entered into the record, which is why we couldn't meet until Friday to do the canvassing board. We didn't ask how many came back on Friday or Saturday. That's water over the dam now. But and I want to say that there were almost 2,000 ballots that were requested by mail through various sources, and not all of them were just Joe Citizen calling up and saying, mail me a ballot. A lot of them are programs that are out there where they're registering people to vote, or party apparatuses or interest groups are having people fill in forms, then check the box, mail me a ballot. But there were over 2,000 ballots that were mailed that did not come back. So just factoids to ponder as we think about that.
Interesting. Commissioner Wolf, let's go with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The workshop, of course, on the 4th, and then Newmarket Township had their monthly meeting that evening. Planning and zoning met on the 10th. They had a couple of permits they approved. On the 12th, I met with Kate at Household Hazardous Waste, and there is lots of junk in the ditches. People that are dumping. In fact, on Jackson Township, did you see that picture? Someone had dumped off, was it 80 or 100 tires?
Oh,
On the road, like there's, two-way road, one side of the road, big, like semi-tires, to car tires, tractor.
Wow.
That was unbelievable.
Okay. But at least most of the analysis I've heard is most of the junk that's been dropping off isn't things that would be accepted at our facility. It's like garbage and mattress.
Yeah, so I don't know, so we don't know what people are doing is if they're moving and they find all this stuff in their house and they think, I gotta get rid of this and nothing's open right now, so I'll just, and I suspect it may not even be people from Scott County doing it. It might be people from Hennepin County or Dakota County that are coming here to Scott County, after 11 o'clock at night with a truck, and, they have someone in the back of the pickup truck, and I'm just, because there's couches, there's things all over, I'm noticing a lot of it, and so it's, and I had told Kate, I said, if you're dumping stuff into people's yards, that's tantamount to stealing, because if they have to pay to get rid of that stuff, if it's dumped in my yard, well, I have to pay for it. Well, you've stolen from me, essentially, so dumping is stealing, in my opinion. So stop dumping, find somewhere to go with it. There's places to take that stuff to, right?
You have to pay.
There
Yeah,
is.
you just have to pay. They're cheap.
There is, I think, there used to be a place on Black Dog Road, you could go down there, and the guy would look, $45. It's like, how'd you calculate that? Okay, but I just want to get rid of it, so here's $45. So, anyhow, then that evening, Cedar Lake Sewer met. We went over, so they're setting a levy for next year. There's some extra expenses with some bonds and stuff, so they're going to increase that a little bit there. I-35 Solutions on the 13th. Met with Water Resources. Talked about the McMahon Lake and the need for that water to get out. And with the Water Resources people, there's some residents too. And the residents sound like they are willing to help pay for some sort of a permanent outlet that would help that water get out of their lake, because it is, every rain just keeps on moving it up, and we're gonna start, losing our county road. It's part of our road there if we don't get the water out of there, timely. So anyhow, so they're okay with, if there's some sort of cost share or whatever, that would be great with them. That evening, Alcoona Market had their budget for the next year, and so they're gonna look at their levy. Spring Lake Township also met. Perry Mulcrone came out, gave a nice presentation on the broadband. They're gonna meet about that and decide, and I think they'll probably agree to it, but one of the board members was gone, so they didn't wanna, take up action on that, but sounds like it's pretty good there, so. Then the scale meeting on the 14th, I thought that survey, there's a lot of telling stuff on those student surveys. I mean, I thought that's really good stuff, so. And then Prior Lake City had their meeting last night, and all's quiet. They just went over some road improvements for next year, and that's the end of my report.
All right, yeah, thank you. Commissioner Ulrich.
Yes, on the 6th, I had my monthly meeting with Leslie Vermillion, and then also that day, the Scott County Transportation Committee. We discussed cost participation policies related to Credit River and how that might relate to upcoming road projects. We discussed Congressman Craig's visit to the 169 build project and how that might happen. On August 7th, the Scale Executive Committee, there were 3 initiatives that were discussed. One was a lobbyist, one was a candidate forum, and one was the Scale Awards for exceptional work on behalf of Scale. I spoke pretty strongly against a lobbyist, at least a full-time lobbyist. We did support a small amount of lobbying effort, about $30,000 related to street impact fees and so forth. I don't think the group realized that a full-time lobbyist would cost $100,000 or so, somewhere in that ballpark. There doesn't seem to be much appetite for that. The candidate forum that was later discussed at another Scale Executive Committee after the regular Scale meeting, and we decided in the next election cycle, we would have an informal candidate forum where we hear from them, they hear from us, we present what is Scale and then our legislative package, so there seems to be support for that 2 years from now. Scale Award, that may be something that's supported where we would give an award for exceptional work on behalf of Scale. On the 10th of the STA board meeting, there is a real negative development. Met Council wants to take over operation of the Red Line, which runs on, through Cedar Avenue in Apple Valley. MBTA has been providing that service through a contract with the Met Council and Metro Transit. That's a bad trend. It seems like the fear of Met Council maybe wanting to take over opt-out service, this might be a step in that direction, which is very troubling. We had a programming committee for FISH on the 11th. So we talked about September 10th meeting will be on public health and the student survey and a COVID update. On the 8th, we'll talk about how schools are providing services in this COVID environment. 12th of November, Veterans Court, that was October 8th, in case I didn't make that clear. November 12th, a Veterans Court presentation. MICA on August 12th, August 13th, we had a regular FISH meeting that was related to coping during this time where kids are home and organizations that help families that are having difficulty. Together for Good presented, Crisis Nursery presented, and so did Save Families. It's a very good meeting. The one to August 14th, we had the 169 Corridor Coalition Executive Committee met, and we talked about the 41 and 169 ribbon cutting event. It seemed like there was some sentiment to have a distancing event with masks and so forth and have a live event. There was also some debate whether it should be all virtual. The 169 Corridor Coalition wants to have a live event, smaller in scale, not as big an invite list, but still a real ribbon cutting and with masks and distancing. The Congressman Craig event was discussed again. There was some question about a tour and a bus, and normally when you think of bus, you think of 15 to 20 that might get on the bus. I think the thought was that if they had a bus, it would be for the 5 or so that were wanting to tour together, and there'd be spacing on that bus. There was some debate about a bus, and I guess I was open to a bus if it was just a few that were spaced out, but a bus full was not something I would support. I think it might be better just to go straight to the training center and do a virtual presentation of the project and have spaced out people at the training center. They're gonna be at the training center for most of the event anyhow. On that same day, we had our scale meeting, we had the student survey and school events for the fall. Later, we had the scale executive committee I already referred to. The candidate forum was pretty thoroughly discussed, and we agreed in the next election cycle to have that. It would be during a regular meeting. We'd hear from them, they'd hear from us, and what a scale present our agenda, legislative agenda, even formal. It wouldn't be anything like a debate. Kind of low pressure for the candidates, but a way to present them what a scale and what's our agenda. So we have to speed up our legislative agenda, so our package would be ready between after the primary, but before our general election. 17th, we had our Greater MSP board meeting. We presented the results of the Business and Investment Task Force. We went over strengths and weaknesses in our area, and the weaknesses are, some of them are really troubling. We need to pull together our electeds, get on the same page, and get our act together. I mean, there are people that won't sign a confidentiality agreement, jurisdictions won't sign that, or they won't allow funds to be received for a deal. They don't respond well to businesses that have put their best foot forward. They delay, and we're not doing a great job shadowing across the whole region in terms of putting our best foot forward and welcoming businesses. I'm glad we have the first stop shop, and that we're doing our best to put our best foot forward. They're going to create a leadership council to see that some of the best practices do get implemented and speak more directly to some of the problems in our region in terms of overcoming barriers. There was quite a bit of talk about our brand and how to fix our brand and do something that would help our brand. I would suggest it really. We've got two case studies, two ideas that we've had going for a long time that would do a great work in fixing our region. If we had the scale kind of concept, if that were to become widespread in our counties, that would help people pull together, and I think it would really advance our region, working together, development and economic development. And then the fish funnel also would be a great one to develop across our region. We had our MBTA management committee that same day. We reviewed the budgets and budget amendments, and that's the end of my report. Thank you.
That guy has chewed through some bandwidth over there on that network device over there. All right, for my report, many of them are redundant here. The fourth workshop was mentioned on septics. On the fourth, we also had the, I'm going to be careful to make sure I name this right, the diversity strategy session with Mr. Bukata Hayes. I still think that's a stage name. It's so awesome. It was a great discussion. It was a great time to have some just open, honest, transparent discussion, and that's what I appreciated. Not anyone talking at or down or up to anybody, just discussion. So it was really good. On the 6th, I did have a in-person meeting with the Beacon. I call it the Beacon Chit Chat. We met over at Prior Lake, out in one of their picnic tables, outdoors. And I just kept trying to ask the question of what is it you're asking for? And in the end, it was, the capital outlay, and then one said, well, and then probably some operations down the road, and then another one, well, probably not that. We don't really know what that is yet. And I just kept saying, look, that's what I personally want to know what the total ask is. Don't ask for one thing and then knowing there's something else coming. Ask that up front, and then I again, speaking for myself, said I still can't quite grasp what it is you're trying to, I know the building, I get that, but what inside the building? What is there going to be some transitional short term? Is it all once it's full, they're there for a lifetime, or until they get the services needed or whatever? Is it just Scott County? Is it a regional? So there may have been a little may have been a bit annoyed with me, but I was trying to just ask my questions in grace. These are the questions that I have. I I personally need these answered, and I said, by all means, our budget is online, go through it, and where can we get these dollars? Wasn't trying to be a jerk about it, just trying to be transparent and candid. Help me understand. So that was my ask as we left the meeting, which was super cordial. That sounds a little, was not abrasive at all, just, I have some questions that I need answered, and so hopefully they're gonna be able to do that. On the 11th, we had a fish fundraising Zoom call. On the 12th, we had the monthly Zoom call, as Commissioner Ulrich mentioned, which great opportunity to have other groups available that can do some of the heavy lifting the county needs. There are services, this happened to be with, you know, kids in trouble and crisis nursery and ages, trying to get people before they need foster. Like, let's take advantage of that stuff. It's out there, and this is just one idea, one option. The 14th, scale Zoom, I had to leave a little bit early, but I think I caught most of it, which was, there was some good information. We need to chew on that a little bit more. And that concludes my report, so.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes, you can.
I know a few of us may have talked to the Jim from the Renaissance, and they will not be.
Oh, it's good.
Having the Renaissance this fall, which I understand it, but I think we're all a little disappointed that there's not one more thing to do out there, so anyhow, that's my.
Yeah, that's,
unfortunate.
no, it's good, I mean, it's good to
That's
know.
where we're at.
Because I have not seen that. Is that public?
Um,
Or, I mean, obviously it's semi-public now, but.
he called
He's gonna make it today.
me yesterday.
Oh.
Called you yesterday. So I think there was a press release gonna go out.
Okay.
Okay.
And as we all are aware that I sent the letter, just making sure that he knew what he said versus what we were getting inundated with, which I haven't gotten many of those lately. There was a little bit of a difference, so I thought it fair to make sure that he knew that, so I don't know if that.
Thank you.
Again, it wasn't the state, right? I mean, it was the state, it wasn't the county. The county, we have no, very little authority in that particular, but I did get some questions about the animals out there, and I talked to Brad, and they are permitted underneath their conditional use permit.
The elephant people.
Elephant, and I think it was elephant and the camel.
Yeah. There's an organization who's against that. Yeah, they've reached out to me before, but my dad really likes feeding the elephants. So.
Yeah, and I had to tell them that I've never been there. It's not my, doesn't speak to me but I listened to them, and it is allowed under the conditional use permit. Anyway, I'm looking for our county administrator out there in Zoom land. I know she's in the building. Unlike Elvis, she is still here. Are you out there, Leslie?
Hi, Mr. Chairman. I really don't have anything to update on the board on today in my report. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Looking down to my right, the masked county attorney in our presence.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we don't have anything to discuss today.
All right. Well, there we go. Now we're on item number 12.
Motion to adjourn.
We've got a motion.
Second.
We've got a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
See, it just never gets old, never gets old. All right, Deb, before he comes back, he's still here, of course.
Commissioner Weckman Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf. Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye.
And before I gavel out, following this meeting, the county board will be meeting in a workshop setting to receive information on the Credit River Incorporation. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.